all, it's James Johnson, aka Sulphurblade. Welcome back to my channel, welcome back to my content, and welcome back to episode 3 of Suzerain. Let's just dive right in, shall we? We're on the continue screen, so let's do it. A few days later. Alright, we got reports all over the place. Communist Party leader suspected of bomb attack. An unattended bag in the front of the NFP office in Valgan was destroyed by the police on suspicions of a bomb threat, which were then verified. Upon further investigation, the Communist Party leader of Valgan, Milt Hanner, has been arrested in connection to the incident. Weapons seized in Cultural Center. Local police forces report that a wardrobe full of heavy military equipment has been seized in a Young Swords Cultural Center in Jen. Regulars of the place denied having any knowledge about the weapons. The owner of the building have been detained along with 13 other people. The police captured 22 rifles, 2 machine guns. The equipment belonged to the Swordish Armed Forces, dated 1929, but kept in very good condition. Illegal firearms found in Communist Party office. The Bergian security forces raided the local Communist Party office after alleged attacks organized by one of their members and found illegal firearms in the office. The building had been closed, and 22 members of the Communist Party of Swordland have been detained. Illegal KA-74 seized. A cache found with Rumsburg-made weapons, including 47 brand new KA-74s, 2,854 bullets, 12 handguns, 27 grenades, and a partridge in a pear tree. And bomb-making equipment were found in the basement of the abandoned house in Suzerain. No suspects have been detained yet. The investigation is ongoing to determine the origin of the equipment. Young Swords Youth Wing Leader dead after terror attack. Local Young Swords Youth Wing Leader in Suzerain, Eak Torin, has claimed responsibility for the organized attack in the Bloodish market that has resulted in the death of 7. His base of operations have been raided, and he was found dead inside with 2 bullet wounds to the back of the head. The scene was organized to make it look like a suicide. We were not able to get information about the location of the other ringleaders connected to the terrorist attack. Soul Dam at maximum capacity. The Soul Dam has reached its maximum capacity. The dam, a crucial element to the city's infrastructure, has been handling an enormous amount of water inflow recently. With the reservoir at full capacity, the dam's operational efficiency is under scrutiny. Maintenance checks are being conducted to ensure the dam's safety. Narbel has reported that it is currently too understaffed to deal with the ongoing political violence. Due to the small size of the police force in the city, they have been working non-stop, and a number of officers were sent to the hospital as a result of severe fatigue. Minister of the Interior Lilias Graf has been working with head of the police Carl Reeser to address the issue. Police overburdened in Astord. We've been receiving reports of a lack of equipment and staff from police forces in Astord. With the escalating violence in the city, the officers have been working 12-hour shifts to suppress the protests to no avail. The police commissioner of Astord has requested reinforcements and extra supplies of tear gas from nearby cities. Well, it seems we have some problems going on in the country. One of my small critiques about this game is that it gives you these big decisions. It gives you a lot of story, and then it gives you a few big decisions here and there. It doesn't really give you a lot of, I don't know, ways to gently fix things. Not a lot of smaller decisions, if you will. We evidently have something going on here. Horton critiques trade. The leader of Agnolia has diplomatically critiqued the imbalance of trade between our countries. Concerns were raised over how much of Swordland's profits from net trade in comparison to Agnolia. Prime Minister Martin van Horten's requests a fair reevaluation of existing treaties in future negotiations. The latest diplomatic message from the leader of Welland warned us regarding a pathway from the mountains of Bergia that allowed traders of the state escaping to Swordland. President Victor Smolak has demanded that the border security be increased. He also sent his best wishes about handling the protests in Swordland. Reports of BFF activity in the capital. The chief of police, Karl Griesner, reported that 2 Bloodish women with affiliation to the Bloodish Freedom Front had been caught in Hallsword before they could execute a terror attack at a crowded rally. Both women are listed as wanted criminals and enemies of the state. The arrested women have admitted their intentions to attack the NFP rally at Sill Square when Casaro Kibner gave his speech but rejected any connection to the BFF. Both claim that they were acting alone. Police reports that the situation is under control and further investigations are underway. Swordland economy has been displaying a downward trend over the past 2 years of Malcolm's presidency. If we want to prevent our country from declaring bankruptcy, we need a way out of this recession, and we need it now. The economic downturn keeps hitting hard at the businesses which are struggling to stay afloat. It is clear that a helping hand from government is required to control the situation. There's no other way apart from bailing out business to truly provide relief to the economy. This, in turn, should revitalize the economy by creating more employment opportunities and increasing production in Swordland. Alright, so that's enough news. Dinner with the family at home. Security briefing on the threats against Swordland. Well, let's go with the briefing. I arrived in the front of the doors leading to the Situation Room. Today's security briefing was arranged in 2 parts, starting with internal matters and moving on to external matters after a short break. The Minister of Interior, Lilias Graff, and the Minister of Justice and Law, Neo Morgana, would join us for the first part, the law enforcement briefing. For the second part, the Minister of Defense, Iosif Lancia, would join with a few high-ranking officials, including the Chief of the Armed Forces, Valken Kruger. Oh boy. Sir. Let's begin. Everyone in the room sat down except for Lucian. He put on his glasses and went through the documents in front of him. Shortly after, he raised his head to address the attendees. Mr. President, ladies, we will kick off today's meeting with the internal security briefing. I'm assuming everyone has already been over the agenda. We all have busy schedules, so without further ado, I will jump into our first topic. As we feared, the political atmosphere has worsened. The reports around the country indicate that tensions are rising as we feared. What is the state on the Bernard Circus investigation? I have received news this morning that the investigation into the murder of Bernard Circus has been concluded. Please enlighten us. The more we know, the better. After further investigation and testimonies, we have confirmed the motive and also the events leading up to the shooting. A few days prior, members of the Red Youth invited a violent attack on a young sword local leader in Gen. We believe the young sword then called for revenge, leading to the death of Mr. Circus. Since he often spoke against the young swords and the nationalist settlement in the assembly, he was a big target, not to mention his radical communist views. Political violence needs to stop now. Yes, we've kept it at bay for so long, but it seems that there are now new triggers. Lilius handed over the report and pointed at a highlighted section in the document. The investigation revealed a very troubling fact. The funding sources of the Red Youth have a clear link to United Cortana. What does this mean? That the communist superpower is meddling in our affairs. Duh. Several Red Youth members with ties to United Cortana have been detained, and the information extracted from them points to a preparation for a communist uprising in Swordland. It isn't unusual for the superpowers to influence other nations, but I think this case is a little far-fetched. The left lacks popular support in Swordland. Nia eagerly lifted her hand. I motioned for her to speak. I went over the report in detail. It would be wrong to jump to the conclusion about a clear foreign interference yet. United Cortana has humanitarian and cultural ties with many countries, including Swordland. I also don't want to jump to a conclusion immediately. We shouldn't create a crisis with them. Nearly 3 decades ago, they funded General Ricard and tried to establish a communist dictatorship in our country. If it was not for Colonel Sol, we would have seen the real crisis. She took a sip from her glass of water and continued. Our police chief, Karl Griesner, has linked the funding channel to the United Cortana consulate in Benfi. As we all know, the enemies of Swordland are many, but we also have threats inside the country. Our country always had issues. This is part of our job. If we give up, essential freedoms to purchase temporary security. We deserve neither freedom nor security. This is debatable, but yes, we know what more security and surveillance caused to this country under President Sol. Let's not forget that President Sol, God bless him, brought stability after a long period of bloodshed and chaos. But moving on. Our highest internal threat comes from the estimated 20,000 strong Bloodish Freedom Front led by the imprisoned Dulin Arg. They are a banned political organization, now a militant force that is trying to incite racial violence. Are they supported by our Bloodish citizens? To some extent. Luckily, they couldn't attract a wide audience of Bloods, but they could potentially attract thousands if anti-Bloodish sentiment spreads in Sorland again. Our intelligence intercepted 2 crates filled with weapons close to the Romsburg border. They were filled with military-grade Ka-74s. We expect that more have been smuggled in. A group of Bloods were caught with these guns at a checkpoint not far away. The governor of Bergia, Felix Braun, is already taking the necessary measures to counter the threat. Romberg has been acting aggressively in the region for a long time. I'm not surprised that they would attempt to weaponize the Bloodish people against us. This is worrying, very worrying. We need to keep level-headed with Romsburg. They are looking for reasons to take action. They will play dirty while we play nice. It is a battle we will lose. This is grave news, but we must be careful not to stoke the fires of anti-Bloodish sentiment. Unfortunately, Government Braun is directly causing the tension to increase with his increasingly anti-Bloodish stance. I must remind you, Governor Braun is directly responsible for the arrest of Dulin Arg, the previous leader of the BFF. It's true that his methods can be extreme at times, but it was his police that kept the region peaceful over the last decade. He is misusing the power given to him by Tarquin Sol. The insane authority of the governor is surely a root cause. It would be very difficult to revoke the special status of Bergia under the current circumstances, Miss Morgana. The presidents no longer have the authority Tarquin Sol enjoyed. For now, yes, but with enough justification for it, it would be possible. Anyway, we will discuss this at a later time. No, I'd like to hear more. As you know, Bergia was given a special status by Tarquin Sol after the full-scale uprising by the BFF against the Sordish government in 35. Those couple years were disastrous for Bergia. Dulin Arg and the BFF declared war on us, openly attacking our people, and occupied entire cities. It was a massive uprising, but I'd like to point out that the longest time they were in control of a city was 2 weeks. I wouldn't call that an occupation. Despite the arrest of Dulin Arg in 44, the BFF ceasing its activities, the special status of the regions were never revoked. Today, the special zone of Bergia gives the governor an insane amount of authority. He was in trouble with the law before for not following the central government's authority. Unfortunately, Bergia also has its own police forces, directly commanded by Governor Braun. They are not part of my ministry, and only cooperate when they are forced to do so. This is a problem. Even though our forces have the authority to serve in Bergia, the special zone leaves the security of Bergia mostly in the hands of the governor. That leaves my hands tied. Discrimination Bergia suffers is maddening. We should find a way to revoke the special status of Bergia one way or another. I'd rather not disturb the status quo. We must reverse the situation. It is absurd that the Ministry of Interior does not have full control of Bergia's security, or non his special powers deserve credit for it. Now, the discrimination Bergia suffers is maddening. We must find a way to revoke the special status of Bergia one way or another. I will do my best, Mr. President. What is the second most important threat? It is the gang violence that is threatening Nargis and Anglin regions. Two prominent organized crime families are at war, and the potential for bloodshed is real. Which two crime families? One is known as Coronelli and the other as the Skinner Cartel. They used to be allies until a recent disagreement. Both are active in the cities of Narbel and Astord. They are playing with fire. I want them gone for good. While I agree it would make Swordland a better place, it will not be easy. These gangs exist because corruption is so common in our country. They buy our police officers and slip by checkpoints. Lilius Graf sighed deeply. I shall be honest with you. With our current capabilities, we may not be able to prevent the further arming of separatists and maintain order in Bergia, Nargis, and Anglin. You promised to increase Swordland's security and law enforcement budget. You must keep this promise. You will keep that promise, especially in light of this information. We will rid our country from separatists and violent thugs if you can support us. I wish you would stop using the word thugs, Lilius. The real problem is corruption, which is fueling the gang violence and is very likely the reason why these weapons were smuggled in. A higher budget could help us end that. Your ministry must tackle the issue with persistence, Miss Morgana. We are, but it needs all the attention it can get from our administration. Lilius and Nia were openly scowling at each other. Lilius turned back to her notes. Well, this concludes the topic for the internal portion. Thank you for the updates, Miss Graf, Miss Morgana. Thank you for the overview. Have a good day. Until next time. The two ministers left the room. We took a short break before continuing to the second part. Upon invitation, Iosif Lancia, along with three higher-ranking officials from the Ministry of Defense, walked into the room. One of the men was none other than General Kruger, the Chief of the Armed Forces. Iosif made his way towards the table, while the others stood by the door. Mr. President, let's begin. I brought General Kruger with me due to the escalation on our borders. General Kruger stepped forward and saluted. He had a strong jaw with a sharp cheekbone. His tall stature and uniform and medals combining with his deep and intense stare made him look threatening. He was in his 70s, yet he had a bulky build that was the result of his commando training. Not only was he the second most decorated officer in Swordland, he was also the longest serving. Salute him. He smiled at the gesture and bowed his head in respect. Iosif tapped his foot impatiently. He seemed uneasy with the presence of another high-ranking officer in the room. Gentlemen, thanks for coming to this significant gathering. Let's begin. Iosif and Valken took their seats at the table, while the rest of the officers stood by the door. Mr. President, the situation at the western and northern borders towards Runberg is very tense. We are observing deployments of divisions closer to our border. Rumsburg has been acting increasingly expansionistic in the past decades and also interfered in Agnolia, but now they have turned their sights on us. This concerns me very much. We are observing these areas actively. Our contingency plans are ready. It seems like they want to increase the pressure both externally and internally. Mr. President, if I may. Please, General. The picture is becoming clearer. The latest information from the interior about the weapons cache, and now there is an active military buildup close to our border. The entire situation was analyzed by our General Staff, and our prediction is a future territorial incursion by Rumsburg. I have complete trust in the General Staff. We will not let you down, Mr. President. The General Staff is composed of the smartest military individuals. I require an increase in military budget to enlist more soldiers. Only then we can stand strong against our enemy. The enlarged armed forces will hold them at bay. Falcon is right. We do need an increase in military budget, although we don't see eye to eye on exactly how to spend the budget. That much we agree on. I have my concerns about Rumsburg too. We need strong allies to withstand such a superior power. They are our nemesis. That is an understatement. Times are changing and war is coming, Mr. President. Whether we like it or not, we must be prepared. During the election, you said nothing about focusing on our military. I asked you to reconsider and to increase the military budget. The future and safety of Swordland is in your hands. As you said, times change, Iosif, we will see. Our forces would crumble under a decrease, and Rumsburg would be much more compelled to exploit our weakness. Our country hasn't fallen to any invading force for 200 years. You cannot let it happen, Mr. President. We should find regional allies like Bogsland and Lesbia to deter Rumsburg. There are several options on the table. Rumsburg wouldn't attack any nation allied with any superpower. One shudders at the sacrifices they would require us to make. Yes, but what is difference between losing your independence to one or the other? Everyone fell silent when a soldier entered the room and let Iona Slencia know that a call had come through from the ministry. Excuse me, Mr. President. A few minutes later he entered the room again. His expression had changed. Mr. President, there has been Rumburgian military activity close to Narbel border. I just spoke with the local commander. Valken, we should go to the ministry and get further updates from our branches. Understood. Raising military readiness is the first call of action. If there's truly an extraordinary attempt, we will relay it to you immediately and wait for further orders, Mr. President. Remain calm. Make sure not to escalate things further. Nobody wants war. We will exercise utmost caution, Mr. President. Hail, Swordland. Hail. They saluted and left the room. Rumsburg was already testing us, and the reports from the interior indicated interference inside our borders. Communist, nationalist, bloodish rebels, Rumsburg expansion. What was next? Swordland had always been a key piece in the chessboard of the global rivalry between Arcadia and United Cortana, but in the recent years there was no such aggression from Rumsburg, not at these levels, at least anyway. All it takes is one tiny spark to start the flames of war. The phone rang. Rumsburg had decided to close their consulate in Lakavan. What's this? Arcadia develops first ICBM. Recent intelligence briefings have spotlighted Arcadia's military progress, underscoring the successful completion of the Missile 4, an intercontinental ballistic missile of significant power and range. The Missile 4, with its estimate strike range spanning thousands of kilometers, represents a major leap in Arcadian military technology. Its precision targeting system allows for the destruction of targets at long distances, thereby escalating the potential threat Arcadia poses to territories well beyond the boundaries of Western Maricopa. Alright, I think it's time to go back to the other map. What's going on here? United Cantana Consulate helped protesters. Around midnight, red youth protesters clashed with young swords at the Vasad city center, resulting in many injuries. The counter-protesters were cornered in front of the United Cantana Consulate after they were pushed back by the police. The diplomatic mission opened its doors and the red youth members escaped inside. The police are still waiting outside the building for the return of the red youth members. Well, that's interesting. A consulate sheltering fugitives. Rise of Golkandism in rural areas of Bergia. Golkandism, a minor religious branch of Ruhasist Nurati, has gained a significant following in the city of Suzerain and the rural areas of Bergia, mainly due to limited access to education and employment opportunities. The sect offers a sense of community purpose and salvation through strict adherence to its doctrines. The BFF and foreign proselytizers are suspected to be behind the sudden increase. Many bloodish political leaders are recruiting members through grassroots campaigns, making Golkandism one of the most popular religious groups in the regions. However, officials fear that the sect's strict rules and practices may lead to social unrest, warranting further investigation and the development of strategies in collaboration with local community leaders to address the situation. Ramsburg closes consulate. The real truth behind the economic crisis. We have all seen this scenario play before. Large corporate business time and time again receive money from the government under the disguise of helping the economy. But what about the people? Many in the neglected regions still do not have electricity or fresh water in their houses. And they are the lucky ones? There is a growing housing crisis and people are on the streets begging for food. In the year of 1954, it is high time that money is invested in us, the people of Swordland, instead of armchair millionaires and their luxurious villas. Underhall Construction once again #1. Underhall Construction was once again picked as the #1 construction company of the year by the reputable Statistics Swordland. This was the 11th time the company was selected for the top spot in a row since Chris Shar was appointed as the CEO. Veteran industry leader Shar congratulated the employees first and foremost in a private company meeting held in a luxurious resort in Ellery. He also mentioned the recent addition of Heart of Swordland Organization's CEO Marcel Carante to the board of advisors. Oh, Karis. At the economics, we think now it's a great time to invest in underhaul construction, as the current year's projection already shows a 13% increase in growth compared to last year. Open city information? Widespread protests. The city is in a state of political chaos. After a long day at the palace, I was finally home. I thanked Sergei and walked through the front gates, nodding at the two guards as I went by. Even as I turned the doorknob, I could hear Deanna rushing down the stairs to greet me. I opened the door, and there she was, standing in front of me with expectant eyes. "Papa, you're home." "There's my beautiful princess." I lifted Deanna up and hugged her while trying to put the keys in the tray next to the entrance. She was growing fast. Lifting her up was no longer as easy as it once was. "How was your school?" "Boring. I like my old school better." I put her down, and her expression turned serious. "Papa, are the bad men gone?" "It was only one bad man, Deanna, and yes, he's gone now." "Okay, Papa." Deanna dashed down the hall. "Mama, Papa's here." Monica appeared next to the kitchen door. She was wearing an apron and holding a spatula in her hand. "Deanna, what did I tell you? No running in the house." "Yes, Mama." Monica approached me and kissed me on the cheek. A tantalizing smell wafted from the kitchen behind her. I'm hungry. When's dinner?" "Hello to you too, Anton. It's almost done. I'm making your favorite." "You mean..." "Yes, zabla." Zabla was one of my hometown specialties. A chickpea stew, sounds terrible, topped with beef braised in tomato and Bergian spices, traditionally served in a clay pot. It was absolutely my favorite dish, especially paired with Kibij, a potent, unfiltered wine from my region. It's my lucky day. What's the occasion?" "No occasion. I just wanted to cheer everyone up a bit." Her smile faded, and she lowered her voice so that Deanna wouldn't hear, especially after what happened at the ball. "I'm worried, Anton, for you, for the children, and for the country." Deanna suddenly appeared next to us. "Mama?" "Yes, sweetheart." "I'm hungry." "We'll eat in just a minute. Will you help me set up the table? Anton, can you tell Frank to come down for dinner? He's been sulking in his room all day." Monica started taking out the plates while I headed upstairs to fetch my son. Loud rock and roll music echoed down the hallway from his room. I caught a faint hint of cigarette smoke. Knock on the door. There was no response. Knock on the door again. There was still no response. Bang on the door. The stereo in Frank's room clicked off. All right, all right." He unlocked and opened the door. "What do you want?" "Hand over those cigarettes and join your family for dinner." "You smoke, don't you? I'm old enough to do what I want." As long as you live in this house, you'll do as I command. He heaved a sigh, handed me the packet, and headed downstairs. I followed him to the living room. The table was prepared, and Monica was ladling food onto the plates. Come on, have a seat. It won't be as tasty if it's cold. As we started eating, the room went quiet. Monica's cooking was as delicious as ever, but I had the feeling that wasn't the reason nobody spoke. Monica was the first to break the silence. Say, did you know that they refurbished the grocery store? I don't know if you remember the owner. He's been there every day for the past 30 years. Can you imagine doing the same job for so long? What if you were president for 20 years, for example? I don't want this country to suffer under another soul. Agreed. That must never happen again. Anyway, the grocer really is a nice person. He threw in some extra vegetables with my... Frank suddenly slammed his hands on the table, rattling the plates. Monica, Deanna, and I stared at him. So this is how it's going to be? We're just going to sit here like nothing happened? Dad, you could have been killed. Mom could have been killed. Any one of us could have died. Deanna's lower lip starts trembling. Monica put her hand on Frank's shoulder. And yet we are all still alive. For now, but how long until this happens again? Frank got up from his seat. Fine, let's talk about it. Sit down. Frank took his seat again, scowling. Do you think I would let us go down smoothly? Frank smirked. No. But it's not up to you, is it? It was one rogue shooter. We were not even the target. But what if we were? Frank, listen to your father. If your father says we don't need to worry, then we don't need to worry. You have to trust him. Monica turned to me. We all have to trust each other. Things calmed down a bit at the table. We finished our food in silence. Frank got up first and retreated back to his room. Monica lifted Deanna up and plopped her in front of the living room TV before returning to the table. She sat down across from me. Anton, he's still young. I know, but there's not much longer we can shield him from the ugliness of the world. That's what worries me. I made plenty of rash decisions when I was his age. He's had every opportunity. I never did. Why is he still acting out? I know, but there's not much longer. That's what worries me. I made plenty of rash decisions when I was his age. You make plenty of rash decisions now, too. Frank's not the only one who's scared, Anton. I worry too, Monica. Things might escalate. She got up, stood behind me, and massaged my shoulders for a moment before leaving me alone in the dining room. I sat alone at the table and drained my glass of cabbage. Had I been lying to Frank and Deanna? Was the threat to my family truly over? Time would tell. CSP faction spotlights workers' rights in report, drawing international attention to the pressing issues of labor conditions. A faction within the Cantana Security Pact has released an insightful report on workers' rights within its member nations. As the CSP, consisting primarily of planned economies, grapples with the growing capitalist influence of Arcasian ATO, this report underscores the need for robust labor protections in the world. The document provides a thorough analysis of workers' rights and labor conditions within CSP member nations spanning several continents. It asserts that these nations surpass the global standard with an average minimum wage 45% higher and industrial sector unionization rates at an impressive 90%. However, it also calls for action on issues such as the gender wage gap averaging 12% within CSP nations. The report concludes by advocating for broader enforcement of rigorous labor laws, embodying the CSP commitment to social and political justice. Blah, 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 blah. Yeah, wonderful. And what's here? Morella expresses condolences for Circus. In the wake of Bernard Circus's untimely passing, Prime Minister Alma Sultana and Morella conveyed heartfelt condolences to the people of Sorland. The leader recognized Circus as an influential poet and advocate. Okay, before we react to the unrest, let's check the news. Unrest in Swordland. Political chaos. Alright. React to the unrest. The political situation around the country has escalated. Chief Strategist Lucien Galad has prepared several action plans that we can execute. What will we do to address the intensifying political climate? Visit the affected towns in person. President Rain talks to protesters. President Anton Rain visits towns around Greater Holsword and Grunny regions, which were heavily affected by the protests and riots that popped up around the country, triggered by the death of Circus. He was seen talking to the protesters and listening to the concerns of the citizens. This sends a powerful message to the citizen that the government is walking among them and listening to their problems. Holsword is desperately trying to restart Swordland's economy after the recession, and this political unrest is not helping, said the Swordish scholar and professor of law at Holsword State University in Holsword. It was late in the evening. The Maroon Palace was finally getting somewhat quiet when I returned to my office at the top. I eagerly approached my chair and sprawled out on it. It had been an exhausting day, just like every day since I took office. Lean back and relax. I stretched my arm, leaned back in the chair, and took a deep breath. Holsword skyline was daunting but beautiful. I glanced downward out the window and saw Sergei and the guards waiting for me by the main gate. I heard a couple of knocks on the door. My secretary, Livia Suno, entered. Mr. President, Mr. Tusk is here to see you. You had a meeting with the Lotherberg spokesman. I'm so sorry for not giving you proper notice. Do I postpone the meeting with one of the richest and most influential people in the country? Do I holler at my secretary? Nah, don't worry about it. Thank you for understanding. After a moment, Mr. Tusk swaggers into the room. I'd met Sorlin's most prominent businessman once or twice, but never alone. He had large jaws, blindingly shiny shoes, and the air of someone who's used to getting his way. Anything to drink, Mr. Tusk? Water? Whiskey? Cognac, preferably from before you were born, sweetheart. I'll check the supply room. Livia backed out of the office, shooting me an apologetic look as she did so. Walter hung up his hat, which I could see was lined with mink. He fixed me with a long, hard stare, then broke into a toothy grin. Good evening, Mr. President. I'm here to congratulate you. We both sat down. My business partners and I wish you a successful term as the leader of our nation. Get to the point, Mr. Tusk. Why are you really here? I see that you're not very welcoming, President. I merely congratulate you. I see no reason to necessitate rudeness. Forgive me. I didn't want to be rude. Long day. No need to ask for forgiveness. You are the President, after all. May I continue? Nod. I'd like to build a profitable relationship between us. Of course you do. That being said, there are some concerns of mine and the people I represent, which I would like to take this opportunity to clear up. The people you represent? You know that I represent the Lothberg Group, Mr. President. But of course these concerns are not limited to them. The ruined state of the economy in Swordland has influenced everyone. The recession hit us all hard. Walter pulled out a box of cigars from his jacket. I had these brought from Lesbia, the best cigars in the whole continent. Would you like to try one? I'd rather not have you smoke here. Sure, no problem. You are having a good start to the term for sure, besides the recent troubles. Glad that you have decided to promote the free market, which is the only thing that can get us out of this mess. The ability of the free market to evolve is hard to dispute. We really think that there are many elements where our capital could be of help. To the government? Capital. Okay. Yeah. He grinned. The highway investment was a good call, but there was more to gain in the high-speed rail, especially for business logistics. The England region was in dire need of investment. The most important goal is to divert investments where most profits can be made for the Treasury. We can be close allies. The group can help you get Swordland out of the recession, which will be the key problem to solve in your term and could even determine your re-election. Let's start with a gesture of goodwill. Soon, the investment project contracts will be awarded to one of 3 main contenders. He pulled a check out of his pocket and slid it toward me on the table. My personal bank details were listed on it with a deposit of 500,000 Sordish Ren ready for transfer. This was 6 months of a president's salary. If the contract was somehow awarded to Underhall Construction, they would not only work hard and deliver, but also do it on time. What do you think, Mr. Rain? Would that be good? He put his index finger on the check. There was a noise by the door. Livia Suno was standing there holding a tray with a bottle and 2 glasses. I'm so sorry, Mr. Tusk, but all I could find was a 1942 Sevigny. I hope that's acceptable. She quickly put the tray on my desk and walked out. Tusk eyed her as she left. Remind me to visit your office more often. Now, where were we? Do we have a deal? Did you just try to bribe the president of Swordland? I refuse. Walter sighed and pulled the check away, putting it in his pocket. Did you think I was just another corrupt politician? Administrations are built on mutual beneficial partnerships, but I do understand where you stand now. Oh, I almost forgot. Please hello to Mr. Caranti for me. He smiled. Have a good evening, President. Walter stood up and grabbed his jacket and made his way towards the door. He closed the door behind him. I gathered my things and prepared to finally head home. As I walked out, I noticed Livia still there, covering up her typewriter for the evening. If I may be so bold, Mr. President, did you accept his offer? Of course I didn't. How could you even ask me that? The other girls have told me about all kinds of dealings that went on during the Alfonso administration. I wasn't sure if you were that kind of president. I most certainly am not. She and I took a moment to look out over the lights of the city before heading to the elevator. Yep, I just gave up a bunch of personal wealth. The Ministry of Defense reports that the situation along the border is getting tense. Rumberg's Southern Army was sighted training close to our border and did not respond after we issued a radio message. The Chief of the Armed Forces, General Kruger, reports to have increased patrol duties along the northern border to signal readiness. Local police working with nationalists. One of our agents, acting as a young sword member, had an encounter with 2 members of the local police force in Anrica, Elsa Bowler and Vic Neeser. According to the report, the policeman tried to bribe the agent to burn down a store that belongs to a known Communist Party member and to instigate further violence. We have detained the policeman on charges of corruption. Alright, what do we got here? In a formal address, Grand Duke Axiel Reinhardt of Pales issued a cautionary statement regarding recent Rizian activities. The Grand Duke expressed increasing concern over the intensifying border dispute and clashes over territorial waters and gas fields. Asserting Pale's sovereignty, he called for respect for international law and peaceful dialogue to prevent further escalation. He urged the Alliance of Nations to mediate the situation, emphasizing the potential risk these tensions could pose to regional stability. Economic relief plan, meeting with Marcel Conti, finalizing the H3 highway contract. Okay, and the news. Foreign Gasom engineer salaries under scrutiny. Kibner suggests expanding executive powers. The leader of the NFP, Kisaro Kibner, has suggested that the new constitution should expand executive powers, adding fuel to the debate over the possibility of reforming the 1929 constitution. He pointed out the current dire situation of Swordland and emphasized the need for strong leadership. Worker Party Solidarity March. The pro-minority Workers' Party of Bloodia rally in the Bloodish majority city of Ezran. Bloodish citizens targeted. 20 Bloodish were targeted by a group of people suspected during their peaceful protest support. Loose calls for corporate responsibility in Narvel. Labor Union of Swordland, led by Katarina Horton, made a strong call for corporate social responsibility in Narvel, income inequality and public service. Reform demands gain popularity. An act to ease the economic hardships felt in the country. With the assistance of the National Business Council and the Central Bank, Simon Hall put forward a countrywide relief plan to mitigate the economic hardships that are being felt. We can either provide stimulus checks for people in need, or bail out businesses under serious financial strain, or decide not to approve the plan -2 governmental budget. Stimulus checks for people in need. Oh, I don't know. Bail out business under financial strain. Businesses provide jobs. We can either provide stimulus checks for people in dire need, bail out business, or not to approve the plan. -2 government budget. Is it -2 if we don't approve the plan? Or is it -2 if we do one of the plans? Alright, the last time we helped the people over here. I think this time we'll go with the business. And it was -2 for doing that. Okay, great. Alright, let's talk to the media mogul. Our motorcade headed to the meeting location set by Marcel Carante. I had only my most confidential and trustworthy team members with me. After a few hours of driving along Rue Brasco, we took a turn before entering Conriat. The darkness started setting in as we drove up to the hill. Where are we, Serge? We are nearing the HOS Country Club, Mr. President. We'll be there shortly. We arrived and the big iron gates in the country club opened. It was huge and outright extravagant. The main building, inspired by Lesbian architecture, was illuminated from all sides. It was rather chilly. I was approached by Peter Vectorn and Lucien Galad. I hope the journey was comfortable. The location is very remote indeed. Anything to keep me away from home. It wasn't bad. I'm looking forward to this meeting. I can't think of comfort when our country is descending into chaos. The location is very remote indeed. This is a very exclusive country club for people who value their privacy. Enter the building. After opening the marble-engraved wooden door, we were greeted by two tall women. The receptionist led us to the meeting room upstairs. Marcel was standing by the window looking outside at the beautiful complex. He turned around to have a quick look at us both. He was a strikingly handsome man with well-groomed hair. He walked towards me and with his hand reached out for a handshake. I shook his hand. He had a firm grip. It is such a pleasure to meet you in person, Mr. Granti. I appreciate your efforts to reach out and establish a mutual beneficial relationship. Thanks for hosting us. I admired your father very much. May he rest in peace. Welcome. Your kind words have touched me, Mr. Vice President. He was indeed a great man. I'll stay silent. It's time to look forward. Let's talk about our bright future. Let's have a seat. Marcel gently pointed at the seats. We sat down around a gigantic table. Before speaking, he knocked on wood. The past months have been tumultuous, to say the least. I'm glad you and your family were unharmed at the shooting. The whole incident must have been a shock for the kids. They aren't used to what we lived through back in the late 20s. I still remember when my father took us out of the country when it became too dangerous in Conrad. They were startled, but the important thing is that they're safe and sound. Of course, that is all that matters. No family should suffer from tragedy ever again. We had enough of that. Well, I am known to be a straightforward person, so let me get to the point without wasting your valuable time. I was during the Alfonso campaign when I was struck by what you have done within the party. Marcel started to look at one of the paintings at the wall. Give Lucien a puzzled look. Lucien looked back at me and shrugged, and he raised his eyebrow, something which he usually did when curious. Marcel pointed his finger at me. You said we will transform this nation, Mr. Rain. My conglomerate has a way of doing that, and I don't want them to change. You said we will transform this nation, Mr. Rain. My conglomerate has a way of doing things, and I don't want them to change. Okay. So I want to cooperate with you. Please explain further. You might have the people's support now, Mr. President, but what happens when you make mistakes? Everybody makes mistakes. What is that supposed to mean? Let's hear his point, Vice President. Being a president in this country means having many enemies, enemies that would resort to anything to bring you down. Let's say these enemies cause a scandal or leaked sensitive information from the administration. These would be destructive when they were released, if they were released. You're playing a dangerous game. We're all dangerous men playing dangerous games. You aren't just being nice, are you? I want two things, Mr. President. Number one is a guarantee from you that Rain administration won't meddle in HOS affairs no matter what happens. Number two is a simple gentleman's favor for the future. Let me prove my service to you first, and I'm sure you won't disapprove when the time comes. HOS. Okay. And how do I know I can trust you? My circle advised against this. They don't even know we are meeting, Mr. President. We both put ourselves at risk here, but I'm willing to trust you. The question is, are you willing to trust me and accept this offer? You've been awfully silent, Peter. Peter leaned to my ear and whispered, I think he's getting more out of this than we are. The issue tied to his request must be so important for him that he is offering this risky deal. We need to be cautious. If we get caught out, this gets out. I can't imagine the consequences. Mr. Karate, I have to reject. Such a shame, Mr. President. Here I thought we were going to be good friends. It's a shame, really. I regret coming here to see you. Let's leave. We left the complex and entered the car. I thought that would have ended better. He pushed it too far. The threats were unacceptable. Kazaro Kivner demands emergency to be called. The leader of the NFP, Kazaro Kivner, has demanded an emergency be called to address the increasing political violence in the country. He stated that without a declaration of emergency, Swordland would be destabilized and the integrity of the country would be damaged even further. What's in the news? People forgotten again. It wasn't much of a surprise to see the administration help business, especially when considering that people like Simon Hall are running the Ministry of Economy. President Rain must really be convinced by the brainwashed capitalists around him to think that businesses running on a profit motive will care about workers at all. When was the last time business owners and oligarchs pushed for better employment rights or unemployment benefits? Did they ever allow more holiday or extra pay for overtime? No. So the workers bear the burden and businesses leeching off their backs get the billions of rands worth of bailout. No surprise, dear readers, people forgotten again. Businesses are alive and well. The government has made an excellent move to push for economic relief for businesses. The bailout is saving thousands and thousands of jobs and softening the economic blow. The genius move led by President Rain will play out very well in the years to come. The administration must focus on boosting employment to make sure the working class have food, security, and shelter in a time where their livelihoods are threatened. Some National Business Council members have already come out with positive messages, and there have been positive statistics released by the central bank as a result of the bailout. Swordland is racing towards growth and recovery if the government continues on this path. And finalizing the H.3 highway contract. After a lengthy drive on a cliffside road, we arrive in Langburg. There, crowds of cheering citizens greeted us, and the local government officials escorted us to City Hall. We were here for significant meetings about the H.3 project. Several construction companies sent their representatives to City Hall. Gus Manger couldn't make the meeting due to his visit to Rizia, but I had Simon Hall and Lilias Graff by my side. Besides starting our economic recovery, this project will cut the time it takes to get here by road in half, Mr. President. More importantly, it will lead to improvement in England. I have lived with these people and seen them suffer. I hope so, Lilias. With the highway, we will be well on our way to economically strengthening this weak region. According to my estimations, this project will give about 50,000 citizens from England employment. Excellent. What kind of end results do we expect? Short-term employment and long-term economic development in Nargis and England regions. The underdeveloped cities of Langkirk and Avery will receive a lot more investment after this. Simon searched through the documents he was holding and found the one he was looking for. I have the overview of the companies here. Simon handed the files over to me. Look at the files. The Swedish State Corporation, Underhall Construction, and Taurus Holdings. Founded in 1946 by Geralt Fays, Taurus Holdings is a new entrepreneurial private company that uses cutting-edge construction technology from Arcasia to reduce construction costs and prices. They recently began taking bigger and riskier contracts in several industries, including the construction industry. Taurus also deals with shipyard building, bridge working, training aircraft hangars. The company is known for its great employment perks and high union membership. It is considered much more open and competitive compared to the usual shortish corporations. They are known for their port expansion project in Benfi, which was completed with half the budget. And sadly, I've played this game before, so I now have information that that's going to affect my decision. Okay. The Swedish State Corporation, founded in 1891, the Swedish State Corporation is the main government corporation that is tasked with running public construction contracts in Swordland. It is also part of the Big Four, the four largest companies in Swordland, most usually also called the SSC. It is the most honorable company in the country with a long and solid track record of accomplishing critical projects. In the recent years, the efficiency of the corporation seems to have dropped due to the recession and the somehow corrupt management structure. It is still considered the safest bet for big projects in the minds of many government officials. Underhill Construction. The real estate giant is owned by the mayor of Conriat, Chris Shar. Most people in Swordland know the name Underhill Construction by the many iconic buildings they have constructed in nearly all the major cities. Recently, the company sold half of the shares to Walter Tusk. Imagine that, spokesperson for the Lothberg Group. While this breached certain competition clauses, it was largely ignored. Underhall is a gigantic real estate company that is very influential in construction projects of private sector. Some of their recent work in the Holsword Central Station, which they have completed on time, but violated workers' rights in the process. I reviewed them, and I took the liberty of asking the mayor of Arbury to give his opinion on the matter. Which corporation should we talk about? The Swedish State Corporation. The respected Swedish State Corporation, also known as the SSC, was founded in 1891. It is the main state corporation tasked with running day-to-day construction services for our country. The SSC is one of the most trusted and honorable companies. They have served us a long time. I've worked with them on several occasions. It goes against your election promise of moving away from the state-planned economy. Most importantly, the Swedish State Corporation uses outdated models, resulting in slower construction. A simple look at the regional highway shows us the problem. The regional highway system has no relation to this? I don't agree with your negative statements, Simon. The SSC records clearly show competitive contracts with thousands of employees who have more than 20 years of experience. According to the preliminary calculations of the SSC, they would need more resources to finish a project of this size. I'm on the fence about the SSC. Underhall Construction. The real estate and construction giant was founded in 1925 and expanded during the economic boom of the 30s. Picking this corporation would fit our market economy policy. The CEO of Underhall is Chris Shar, and the mayor of Conriat. He sold half of his shares a few years ago. I had to work with Underhall Construction before in Hallsword. They accepted several contracts for the renovation of our central station and left much to be desired. The H3 project shouldn't be left to them. I would like to hear your thoughts, Simon. I think that they have been doing relatively well in the private sector, where they're dominating the construction industry with successful projects. Nonetheless, they subjected their workers to conditions beneath our standards during the Hallsword Central Station contract, which is troubling. Working conditions must be respected. This doesn't inspire confidence. I agree. The workers were undocumented Agnolians and Wezek immigrants with no papers, a clear violation of our laws. According to them, the tight completion schedule necessitated such bad labor conditions, which still doesn't justify the situation. Underhall has specifically mentioned their solid track record and highlighted that they do anticipate to go over budget, but that they project will be finished on time. Underhall seems interesting, but let's hear about the others. Taurus Holdings. Taurus Holdings was founded in 1946 and is owned by the entrepreneur Gerald Weiss. It is a new holding company whose subsidiaries use cutting-edge technologies from Arcadia to reduce construction costs and prices. They are known to provide for their workers, who are part of the labor union of Swordland. There are other things Taurus does very well, like providing consultants for state corporations, but I can't vouch for their infrastructure construction at all. Why should we pick Taurus? It would fit our election promises of switching to a free market economy. Awarding contracts to privately owned corporations would be a step in the right direction. Taurus has completed fewer projects than other companies, however, they are slightly faster and cheaper. It won several awards internationally for being one of the fastest growing and advanced companies. The innovation aspect is refreshing, especially if they can deliver. They were only involved in smaller scale regional projects. This doesn't prove their capability for larger undertakings that are more complex. The project manager from Taurus Holdings mentioned that they would be able to finish the project with the allocated funding. They are the only company who found the budget sufficient, making them a cheaper alternative. Taurus is definitely worth considering. So you guys may have never played this game before. I've played it through several times, and I usually pick Taurus Holdings. But Taurus Holdings doesn't get the job done on time, and you end up having to spend more money on them. I'm thinking about going with Underhall. Only because of this already known knowledge. Also, I don't know if Underhall is going to try to charge me more. So with Taurus, I think I end up getting charged more and they don't get it done on time. Maybe with Underhall, I'll get charged more, but it'll still get done on time. So getting done on time would probably be better even if I have to pay more. Because with Taurus, I know I'm going to end up paying more, and it's not going to get done on time. I'm going to go with Underhall Construction. Good that we are staying consistent in our economic strategy. Simon signed a certain section of the dossier and fixed his glasses. Very well, Mr. President. The contract will be awarded to Underhall Construction. I wish you had chosen differently, but at the end of the day, the success of the project is what matters. The company will be notified today, and construction work will begin immediately after. Okay. Think we're off to a good start. My expectations are that the grand opening ceremony will happen late next year. I'd better get back to work then. Thank you. This concludes the meeting. The meeting ended, and we spent the remainder of the day attending events in Lenkirk. It was nice to enjoy the natural beauty of England and to eat some good fish. Alright, it's always important to eat some good fish. Alright, what's going on now? Business is bailed out. The government's support for business under financial strain has slightly stabilized the downward spiral of unemployment. While the economic situation remains challenging, the support provided by the government has helped to mitigate the negative impact on employment. Good, good, good. Okay, news. Construction begins on the H3 highway. Underhall Construction has been awarded a 2-year contract for an extensive infrastructure project, subsequent design and construction work as part of the H3 highway expansion project in Swordsland. In addition to the geotechnical ground investigation, Underhall will provide the design of all civil structures, including ground, Yes. So it's kind of funny. So far, I have kind of gone the routes that all of the people who wanted to bribe me to go without receiving the bribes. I'm giving up all this money I could have gotten, and I'm essentially going the same path that they would have dictated me to go had they bribed me. But I'm not getting any bribes for it. I guess that makes me ethical and maybe stupid. But anyway, let's see what's going on in Deer today. Open city information. Widespread protest, homelessness, and funeral of Bernard Circus. The death of Bernard Circus has shocked the country, and his funeral will be held in Dar. Among a large crowd of sympathizers, Circus was not only a communist poet, but also an elected MP, and I'm going to attend the funeral. And now, I guess, the funeral. Dark clouds were looming over Deer. They looked daunting as our convoy started approaching the century-old cemetery. It looked like it was going to rain, certainly fitting weather for a funeral. As expected, Bernard Circus passing maintained its media traction, and all of Swordsland was paying attention to the ceremony, especially to what I would say in my speech today. Sir, we have arrived. Raindrops were running down the car window when Sergei opened my door and held an umbrella over my head. As soon as I got out, flashes from the cameras blinded me. It's okay, Sergei. I will hold my own umbrella. As you wish, sir. He handed me the umbrella and started waiting next to the car with his own. Peter and Carl exited from their own cars in the convoy. They made their way over to me. Anton. Mr. President, I just wanted to inform you that the perimeter is clear and secured completely. There is no one getting in and out without our knowledge. Good work. Thank you, Carl. Carl bowed his head with respect. Good. If anything happens to Anton, you will have to answer to the First Lady. And trust me, Carl, you don't want that. Peter let out a laugh, which drew some attention from the bereaved attendees. You are the only one who can make me laugh at a funeral. Ah, right. I mean, life is full of tragedy. We should try to take it easy if we can. It started to rain. Several unintelligible voices were heard from Carl's radio. He stepped out to reply and returned shortly. We have a small problem, sir. A few, 5 to be exact, Red Youth members are here to attend the funeral. They apparently said they wish to pay their respects to the fallen comrade. Should we let them in? Let them in. As you command. Let's head over. They're about to start. We walked towards the crowd, circled around the grave. Everyone in attendance was wearing black in mourning. The rain started pouring heavily. Bernard's widow and daughter were in the front row, staring at the coffin with a mixture of disbelief and confusion, and above all, a cold, unforgiving sadness. Both of their eyes were very red and swollen from weeping. Before taking my place to observe the ceremony, I gave my condolences to Bernard's wife and his daughter, who looked at me. She reminded me of Deanna. When the religious ceremony was done, I was invited by the priest to deliver my speech. I took the podium. I felt like I had a lump in my throat. I couldn't get the daughter's eye out of my head. Today we're mourning Bernard Circus, a father, a husband, and a loyal servant to this country. Today, towards the back of the crowd, I spotted members of the Red Youth wearing red shirts and black bands of mourning on their arm. They seemed ruly and were respectfully bowing their heads. There was complete silence except for the sound of raindrops. I will confess that I disagreed with Bernard Circus almost entirely, but it doesn't mean that he deserved this. Our country can be a better place. Circus had a dream of a unified Sorland. In these next months, we need to fulfill his dream and band together. But hatred begets hatred. There is only one way to overcome this vicious cycle. We must unite against the evil of this world. I would now like to recite one of the poems he left us. They did not let us sing our songs. They are afraid of the dawn. They are afraid of hope, but our songs will be sung. A moment of silence, please. The coffin was lowered into the grave by the gravekeepers. After a couple of minutes, Bernard Circus was with the soil, no more. As we bid farewell to Bernard, I want to close with the words every sword lives by, a Morgana Westcor. Everyone replied, Vecturn sis day. With applause, I stepped down from the podium. It was time to leave. The widow thanked me with a soft and defeated voice before we dispersed. On my way back to the car, I still couldn't get the eyes of Bernard's daughter nor the faltering voice of his wife out of my head. Would Deanna, Monica, and Frank look the same way if something happened to me? Peter put his hand on my shoulder. That was a good speech. I sensed only respect from his voice. Thank you. I mean it. I know you do. Come on, it's time to go. We've got work to do. He was right. We had work to do. So much more to do. I realized that the rain had stopped, and I looked up. The black clouds slowly dispersed, and sunbeams enlightened our surroundings. As someone once said, even the darkest night will end, and the sun will rise. Hope was still on the horizon. Alright, let's check out the news. They are afraid of hope, but our songs will be sung. Huge crowds of mourners, including President Rain and other senior Swordist officials, joined under a rare display of unity, poured into the heart of Deer today to bid farewell to Bernard Circus, the poet and politician who was shot and killed at the gate of the Maroon Palace after Rain's inaugural ball. With hundreds of police officers in riot gear on duty and traffic barred on major thoroughfares, the normally chaotic section of the city took on a somber atmosphere. The Malin, whatever the word is, anthems played from loudspeakers along Freedom Avenue as Swordish citizens of various ethnicities stood shoulder to shoulder, many of them in tears, others leaning out the window over balconies railings to watch the procession. President Rain gave a unifying message to all of Swordland by attending the funeral. He paid his respect to Circus and met with his close relatives. Rain also made an emotional speech that touched thousands of attendees. He finished his speech with a quote from Circus. They did not let us sing our songs. They are afraid of the dawn. They are afraid of hope, but our songs will be sung. President stands together with Red Youth. Bernard Circus' funeral was held in Deer today among thousands of attendees. President Rain drew criticism when he agreed to attend the funeral. While the decision was not totally out of the ordinary, the fact that Rain is given support to a known member of the Red Youth who promoted throughout his life is unusual. Later in the day, President Rain was seen together with a group of Red Youth members standing together and paying respect to Circus. Nationalists who saw Circus as a traitor heavily criticized the president's moves, which will surely continue among conservative wing of the United Swordland Party. Never would Saul have thought that his party would be led by someone who stands together with a communist who studied in the homeland. Thousands attend the funeral of Circus. Earlier in the day, mourners and wholesale gathered outside the Maroon Palace, where Bernard Circus was shot, holding identically black and white signs reading, "We are all Bernard Circus, and we are all Malinifists." Whatever the word is. We are all communists. The funeral took place in Deer amid tight security. White doves were released into the air, and much of the downtown Deer was closed to traffic. President Rain was among the thousands who attended the funeral. This is a positive indicator that gives us hope that the state might finally be giving up on lynching culture and start to practice self-criticism. Circus's murder has stirred debate among nationalism in Swordland and has been viewed with concern abroad, especially by the Communist Bloc of the East. Okay. Briefing on the current diplomatic situation in the Blue Mansion. The Blue Mansion in Lockhaven hosted us for the important diplomacy gathering. The door opened and David Whiskey, once a lecturer to me, now the Minister of Foreign Affairs, gently made his way towards my desk. May I sit down, Mr. President? Gesture at the chair. Good to see you. He slowly sat down, taking care not to aggravate the arthritis in his knees. He'd always had an air of gravitas. Wow, I can't speak today. He always had an air of gravitas about him, and old age had only served to deepen that. After he settled himself, he regarded me with delight, his blue eyes sparkling. Look at you, Anton, the 4th president of Swordland. What a privilege for me. I still remember the first day you took my class at Holsrud State University. Somehow the inexorable ebb and flow of life has led us here, to positions where we can change the course of history. Everything happens for a reason, David. It was meant to be. We got a little lucky, that's all. This is our opportunity to shape the future, and we will do precisely that. Yeah. This is our opportunity to shape the future. We will do precisely that. I'm looking forward to our new foreign policy. I'm looking forward to present you the latest bill I'm working on. The TCPA has turned out to be an initiative that can significantly boost our tourism and culture industry. This untapped value would help us internationally to promote our position. I am convinced it can also help improve our economic condition. After discussions with Minister Hall and Manger, the GNA and USB factions are supportive too. I really shouldn't have done overtime hours to get it done, but I really care for position and value of our cult. He started coughing again, this time for longer. How's your health, David? Oh, I haven't had any big complications except the usual, after that heart attack earlier this year. The health complications aren't a hindrance to my work, of course, but thanks for asking. How's the Rain family? Frank never liked the spotlight, so that hasn't changed. As time passes, I realize it more. Family is the most important thing in life. We must take care of them. The door opened. Iosif and Lucian joined us for the briefing as the tall case clock hit the hour mark. Peter, however, was missing. I wondered if he was late from all the drinking he did at the party in Lockhaven. We'll talk more later, President Rain. Welcome, everyone. How was your travel to Lockhaven? A little bumpy due to some turbulence. I arrived via a military cargo plane that landed at Lockhaven International. I took the train. It was a little slow, but I can still recommend it for the beautiful landscape. I also had the possibility to work on a couple of things during the ride. Well then, since Mr. Vectorn doesn't seem to be coming today, I think we're ready to start. David, I will start by providing a brief overview of our current status with our neighbors. What would you like to start with? I'd like to hear about Agnolia, our brotherly nation to our northeast. Agnolia, they are still diplomatically non-aligned and probably has one of the most democratic systems between our neighbors. Economic stagnation is a worry for them. Their primary issue is their heavy reliance on foreign investment from us. Agnolia is our most friendly neighbor. We have been allies for the longest time after Rumsburg annexed Dome. This fact needs to be part of the equation. Unsurprisingly, the Agnolian Prime Minister Martin Van Horten is expecting better cooperation through a new, fairer trade deal with us. It was one of his election mandates. A more comprehensive trade deal sounds beneficial to all sides. Both sides could gain from it, but Agnolia has more to win than us. They want to protect their weaker industries, which we are profiting from selling our goods to. Additionally, the latest numbers indicate that currently 1 million Anglo-Swordish citizens live in England, a region of Swordland, which creates a link between foreign policy and our international affairs. These people have suffered socioeconomically, which led them to crime and other problems. In addition, a relaxed immigration policy was one of Angolia's main requests, which is unacceptable. Most of the migrants in our country haven't even assimilated into Swordish culture. Adding more won't help. Okay. So Agnolia, in this instance, is kind of like Canada, right? The Canadian border is not what most Americans consider the issue. You don't have millions of people flooding across the Canadian border, though there are a few people coming across the Canadian border from what I understand. Canada itself has a good Is this me going against my promises? So I promised to increase our border security. However, this isn't where I promised it. If I have to be honest, it's more along Wayland and Rumsburg. The large majority of our border I'm more worried about than the Agnolian border. Is it possible that I can be relaxed on this one section of border and still increase security on the rest of the border? Is that a thing? I'm skeptical about relaxed immigration. You should be. We have already witnessed several societies shifting waves of migration. We should remember that we promised to tighten our immigration law in the election campaign. Well, I want to know more about our evil neighbor, Valgsland. Our cousins of old across the Marchian Sea wish to have good relations with us. As we all know, Vogsland is a socialist republic aligned with the United Cortana. They are an important regional player. It's also the most significant sea power in almost all of Mercopa. It is the only country that can rival the superpowers with their navy. We had hostile relations with them after several wars in the 19th century, which we wouldn't want to experience again. Recently, the relationship has warmed up thanks to Emmerich Hegel. As a result, diplomatic talks can be conducted in the future. It's not easy to forget about the Great Fire of Conriat. Thousands of lives were lost that day. Breaking the ice with Vogsland could be good if we are to rise diplomatically. We shouldn't take any sides between the regional powers. Breaking the ice with Vogsland could be good if we are to rise diplomatically. I agree, they could be potential allies in my opinion. The situation in the region necessitates that we find allies. Well, I don't know so much about allies. Trading partners, maybe? Allies? We're stretching a little bit. They haven't been in good standing with us for the past 200 years. Recently, they have also joined the Communist Contan and Security Pact, subjugating themselves to the United Cantana. On top of that, territorial issues have been flaring up between Agnolia and Vogsland because of the Helligland Island. The Swedish Navy is very concerned with this volatile situation. That island right there. Lucian looked slightly worried. Unfortunately, billions of Swedish Ren worth of cargo is transported close to Vogslandian maritime borders on the Markian Sea and the Grey Strait. This causes significant risks to our imports and exports. In the case of deterioration in relations. The strait is of high strategic value to us. We can't expect the worst. We can't expect the worst? Well, we can. Why am I going to say this? I don't know, but I'm going to say it. Iosif, the Navy is keeping an eye on the situation from a distance, right? We are actively monitoring the sea routes and cargo ships. For now, there is no immediate threat, but we don't know what can happen in the future. What's the latest situation in Wayland? It is tumultuous in the south, as always. Victor Smolak is expanding his power among protests from Wezek people. However, he is quite positive about a normalization of relations between our countries. So, we've got the communist nation of Vogsland. We have our friends in Agnolia that we've been long-time friends with. And then this is more of a dictator type regime here that we're the Wezek. Despite purging the Wezek communists, reports indicate that they have been warming up to Cortanan international aid. As you know, Wieland's stability has always been a concern for the region. But if we want to help them, we must not treat refugees like we did in the 30s. I still can't stomach the inhumanity those people suffered. Trade agreement with them would improve stability and increase mutual trade. Why help such a disorganized state? Not sure about what we can do to help them. Swordland paid enough by housing millions of refugees during the Wayland Civil War, no more. A trade agreement. There would be many bargaining chips discussed, but Wayland could be a new partner in the region. We would also invest in stability there. Our main goal should be to avoid refugee crises like the late 1920s. That civil war had major security and economic repercussions on Swedish soil. One of the demands of President Smolak was to tighten our immigration laws so the political refugees don't escape to Swordland. There has been a recent purge that pushed many Bloodish to flee to Bergia. It is definitely troubling. Gumrin Outpost has regained its importance due to this. I'm sure you would remember that winter at the border outpost, Mr. President. He was right. I did remember that winter. I remembered the despair in the refugees' eyes when we forcefully escorted them back to the Wayland border. It is in our national interest to prevent the formation of a failed state on our western border. Wayland has been increasingly aligning itself towards the Communist Alliance, another point to analyze. It sounds like Wayland is just trying to align itself with anyone and anyone. Two important neighboring countries remain, Lesbia and Rumsburg. Which would you like to hear about first? Well, let's take the bad news first. We'll talk about what's the situation with Rumsburg. Now to the most troublesome nation, Rumsburg, a constitutional monarchy led by Queen Beatrice Livingston. I highly advise caution and calculated action against Rumsburg. Our military must be prepared. The threat is real. They are strong and have the motivation as well as the means to damage us. We shouldn't give them any reason to pursue aggression. I will take your advice into consideration. These types of nations will always try to make up a casus belli, a reason to declare war. While Thornburg openly denies such claims, their past and current actions make it clear that they want to destabilize us. The weapons cache found by our intelligence agencies clearly showed that their goals are: our military must be steadfast and our diplomacy valiant. Iosif looks stern and full of resolve. The Rumsburg threat is one of our top priorities. You can be assured of that. We are always in dialogue with our Rumsburg ambassador to make sure a channel is open to solve disputes. We could use that aggressive attitude against them by convincing the international community. Lucian grabbed the Lacavine Times newspaper and put his finger on the article about the latest diplomatic incident. Their abrupt announcement about the closure of the Rumsburg consulate in Lacavine is yet another step in their escalation. And what about Lesbia? Our southern neighbor is aligning itself more and more with Arcasia. Lesbia is currently led by Prime Minister Patricio Alvarez. They are the jewel of the continent and the second largest economy in Mercopia. Though wealthier, Lesbia suffers from excessive economic inequality. Our past relations have been great, but during the last decade, their investment to Swordlands have dwindled due to our instability. Allying with the richest regional nation could be beneficial. Lesbia is a sleeping giant. We should not awaken them. They keep turning a blind eye towards the region, thinking that Lesbia is above it all. Allying with the richest regional nation could be beneficial. It would be, but it would also mean that we would draw closer to the Arcasian bloc and near the Arcasian Treaty Organization. I am certain that the recession has a lot to do with their retraction of investments. Once they see that money isn't in the picture, they vanished rather quickly because they are capitalists. They have shown a selfish attitude during the Wayland Civil War by closing their borders and funneling refugees to cross into Swordland. Lucian cleared his throat. Our values are too different with Lesbia. It would be hard to see eye to eye. The capitalism of Lesbia is an inspiration to me. Look at their economic power. Everything comes at a cost. In Lesbia, the cost is wealth inequality. But business people are getting richer and richer. There are hundreds of very privileged oligarchs who invest inside and outside of Lesbia. Some made significant business investments in the cities of Benfei and Valgan. This covers the overview of the current situation. We will move on to our trade choice and the response to Rumsburg diplomatic escalation. What are we looking at here? The sun began to set over the hills surrounding Lacovin. The team was ready to give advice on the new trade initiative and the response to the latest diplomatic incident with Rumsburg. Peter arrived late. He looked a little rougher than usual. It must have been the drinking from last night. Hey there, folks. Excuse my delay. I'm sure I didn't miss anything we didn't already know. You were still supposed to be part of this meeting an hour ago. Punctuality is important. We're talking about serious subject here. Peter was assigned a task for me, that's why he's late, so let's move on. Yes, it went successfully, sir. Peter's tone was more serious. Expect a report on your desk tomorrow. The Vice President will be part of the trade delegation, so it will be great to have his input on that subject as well as the Rumsburg incident. Rumsburg Consul Sir Bran Harrington announced the closure of the 120-year-old consulate. Now their diplomatic staff is leaving this city to go back to Thornborough. He blamed the lack of security in Swordland due to the assassination and subsequent protests, but it is obvious that they are making excuses. Bastards. First they close their consulate, and then they blame our security. Their concerns could be genuine, but this reaction is unnecessary. Agreed. Other diplomatic missions have worked with our security units to increase the protection of staff and buildings. The neglect of President Alfonso and the chaos of the elections delayed our diplomatic efforts. Now there are only 2 Rumsburg diplomatic missions left in Swordland. One is the consul in Dare, and the other is the embassy in Hallsword. We are accustomed to the usual rhetoric, but this is far more serious. They are playing with fire. Look at what the Wayland destabilization has done to the region. Swordland breaking apart would tear Morcopa apart. In my entire career, I have never seen our Rumsburg relations suffer this much. The previous low point was the annexation of Dome. Iosif Lancia was furious. He barely kept himself from slamming the desk. There are worrying developments like the smuggled arms and the buildup near the border. Our military must be buffed up to stand against a great power like Rumsburg. We either respond to their aggressive act with a diplomatic condemnation, or we retaliate by closing our consulate in Dome. No, we're not closing our consulate. I want to say that an escalation would be risky this early in our presidency. We should focus on creating a negative image of Rumsburg in the international scene. The people of Swordland must be protected no matter the cost. I say we respond equally. Write an official diplomatic response condemning this unreasonable act, to declare that Rumsburg aims to destabilize Swordland and the region. As you wish, Mr. President. I shall begin work by immediately informing the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade. Swaying the international stage is key in long-term strategy. I wish we had reacted more strongly. If we don't confront them, they will keep escalating the situation. I, on the other hand, am glad that we are taking the more cautious road. There are 3 trade-related topics to address today. Which topic should we tackle first? Talk about ongoing trade negotiations with our neighbors, Wayland and Angola. I'm interested to hear the intentions of the Kingdom of Rizia. Let's start with 1. Our primary goal will be to successfully sign at least one trade agreement with one of our smaller neighbors. We have 2 options with our trade initiative: starting new negotiations with our old partner Angola to the northeast, and forming a new cooperation with Wayland to the west. Tell me about the trade deal with Angola. First off, the reason behind this option is more diplomatic than economic. Although of course we can't forego the added economic value, Angola is an old ally and a valuable trade partner. The point we are at with the early negotiations is around the steel trade. They are demanding that we buy their steel for a higher price. That is because they think that the deal is far too unbalanced as it is. Their second main demand is a privileged access to our agricultural market. If we are to fulfill their demands, in return they are offering a full alliance with Swordland against Rumsburg. Looking at the current advances of Rumsburg near our border, having a coalition against Rumsburg would prove extremely useful. Obviously, there will be consequences for entering a full alliance. Mainly, the issue is around Hedgeland. Vauxland has clear intentions on taking over the island one way or another, and entering a military alliance with Agnolia will make them furious. I want to state my support for the decision to stick to our old ally Agnolia. Even though I disagree with their demand to relax immigration, we have cooperated with them on many issues in the past. There are obviously subjects that we would still need to tackle, like our economies, the trade goods, and what to do with immigration. My opinion is that this is a good deal and we should go for it. The new Angolan Prime Minister is trying to improve the existing relationship. The downside is that we would need to make concessions, a reality of any trade deal. I would be open to creating a new agreement that would satisfy all sides. That would be the best outcome. If you decide that Angolia is a good option, another point is that they have a very democratic system. After the recent election, the Prime Minister has a mandate to arrange a fairer deal with us. Martin Van Horten also is an avid supporter of relaxed immigration. Since we said we will tighten immigration, he might be reluctant. Starting with the highway construction in Agland plays a part too. Regardless, if we're going to increase our regional influence to previous levels, we might need to make amends with our neighbors. Ultimately, the decision will be up to you as always. Tell me about the trade deal with Wayland. Dealing with a fractured country like Wayland has its positives and negatives. Although it will be lucrative in the short term, there are risks associated with dealing with such a country. They are proposing co-investment projects and a no-tariff agreement. They are also offering oil in return for attracting foreign capital interests from Swordland. However, it is possible that there will be international ramifications of getting closer with a country like Wayland. All in all, this is a very lucrative deal for us. However, we need to think about the consequences. I certainly don't support the decision to become friendlier with Wayland. We carried their burden for decades. Their migrants flooded our country, and now they are expecting a deal from us? Maintaining influence with Wayland could prove useful. Yes, it is risky, but think about our influence on an underdeveloped region like that. We could also sell more products and enter their market easily. I am of the opinion that it's simply too risky. Yes, we would gain resources and immediate capital, but I'm afraid of the consequences. I think the return is too lucrative to pass on regardless of the risk. The migrant crisis was one of the reasons behind the destabilization of Swordland. I would like to point out that it was due to Wayland. If we wish to go forward with the deal when the time comes, there is the topic of immigration to consider. Victor Smolak is a known isolationist. Our promise to tighten our immigration policy will increase the likelihood of the deal. He believes our borders need better security. I personally don't like the idea of getting too close to Wayland. Me too. Agreed. I still think we should give it a try. Our campaign promise was to steer Swordland toward the west and Arcasia. Will have an effect on the negotiations, especially with Wayland. As you know, the current affairs of Wayland are partially a result of the United Cortana's support of Victor Somok. This will be a problem, but definitely worth trying. As for Angolia, this promise has made them cautious, which might make it harder to get a good deal. We also need to consider the effect of our economic doctrine plan. The fact that we have headed towards a market economy will have an influence. Good negotiators optimize the interests which make the difference become trivial, allowing both sides to reach a deal. Very true, Mr. Vector. We have a lot of time to prepare before the scheduled visits to Wayland and Agnolia. I believe this gives a brief overview of our current options. Our trade delegation will begin work towards the end of the year. We expect final negotiations and signing of the trade agreement to happen next year. I'm very much looking forward to visiting Stallport and Warlowitz with party animals like David and Simon. Peter laughed. Iosif narrowed his eyes and stared at him. I'd like to know more about Rizia. The nation south of Lesbia is a centralized constitutional monarchy led by King Ramus Taurus, the grandson of Queen Elysia Taurus the Great, and the son of King Valero Taurus the Frail. The kingdom is a developed nation that wielded considerable influence in southern Macopa before the reign of Valero. The country has lost some territory due to internal strife. The Alfonso government signed vital trade agreements with King Ramus Taurus, benefiting both nations at a time of need. Attempts at further cooperation stalled out due to the king's blood ties to Rumsburg. What exactly are these blood ties between Rizia and Rumsburg? In the 1930s, King Ramus married Princess Lena Livingston, the youngest daughter of King Alfred Livingston, the second sister of Queen Beatrice Livingston. It was a political marriage that benefited Rizia, helping save it from downfall. The two nations are close, to say the least. The Taurus and Livingston families should be considered allies for the time being. However, from a practical standpoint, they are too far from each other to provide military support. Both countries are also part of the worldwide network of monarchies known as Grace. The framework is mostly financial and politically motivated due to the pressure of the communist and democratic systems. All these kings and queens disagree more than they agree, but they're forced to tolerate each other's differences. Imagine if Karanti and the SPC cast the world's remaining monarchs in a soap opera. I doubt he would allow it. It might hurt his hotel business around Port Grim. I would watch the hell out of that. Let's stay on point. Sure. Lucian knocked on the table. We should be more concerned with... Peter interjected and reached in his pocket. Actually, a friend of Gus called Rusty gifted me this beautiful piece of full Rizian gold coin. They say it helps you find love. Look. Peter pulled out the ornamental coin and put it on the table. It was so polished that it caught reflections of the light in the room. Lucian was clearly frustrated. Examine the coin. I took the coin in my hand and looked at the details. At the center was the emblem of Rizia, a fierce bull standing on 2 feet with its horns pointed upward. In the background was a shield intricately ornamented with leaves and crowns. At the bottom, the letters RPG were engraved. What is RPG? Or what is RRG? It's Rizian Royal Gold, the company that mines and processes the high-quality ore used to mint the country's gold. Let's discuss the deal potential and what's on the table. From what we've gathered, there is no clear offer yet. The interest clearly seems to be more control over the gas produced and sold in Swordland. I suspect this must be related to the recent tensions on the coast of Pales. Mr. Manger is working out the details to get more concrete headline terms soon. Of particular interest are the gas fields in the Narbel area of Nargris region. That must be related to the Gasum operation. Gus has ties with the people around the corporation. Even though there is another CEO, Ewald Alfonso is still chairman. Gasum is a private corporation, a fact that limits our control over any foreign investment. Tarquin Sol's Energy Protection Act of 1933 specifically limits the purchase of Sordish Energy Company shares by foreign nations to 10%. Ewald Alfonso adjusted this law in 1948 and increased it up to 20%. Anything above that requires us to change the Energy Protection Act. Ewald holds most of the Gasum cards in his hand still. Gasum is private, but it still sells most of the gas it produces to Sorlin, right? Good thing we handled the transfer of power within the party diplomatically. I'm sure he'll be more open to talk. I see a strong case for Tarquin Sol's regulations. Energy security is important to our nation. Gasum is private, but it still sells most of its gas produced to Swordland, right? I think so, yes. Lucian knows more than me. Up to 70% goes to Swordland. This used to be higher, but international demand has seen Gasum diversify its deliveries outwards. Rumburg and Lesbia are increasing their demand each year. They have hungry industries waiting to be fulfilled. Fueling the Rumsburg war machine is indisputably wrong. Lucian pulls out a pen and took a few notes. David coughed a bit and then continued talking. From our diplomatic channels, we can tell that Lesbia is still very interested in Swordish petrol, whereas Rumsburg wants more gas resources. As a sovereign nation, we must protect our resources. Our energy independence is part of our national security concern here. Gazprom handles most of our gas production. Allowing more market economics to determine the value and output of our energy is aligned with our economic plan. A potential mistake when our traders use our dependence on them against us. I can concur with Mr. Lancia. This is a distinct possibility. If Rizia wants to buy more than 20% of shares allowed by the protectionism law, then the government can step in to make changes to the EPA. Precisely, but we don't know if this will be the case. There is a scenario in which they might invest within the EPA limitations. We just have to hear more before weighing the options. They never revealed much about their involvement to me, but I always had the feeling that Alfonso's crew was more linked to Gazprom than they seemed. I have information that the CEO that replaced Alfonso is a loyalist. Alfonso still is the chairman of Gazprom and the de facto key figure. Additionally, National Business Council Chairman Mikhail Avin and Minister Gus Manger have shares in the company and preside over the board. The power structure behind the scenes shouldn't matter much to us. Affluent swords don't stray far from each other. The shareholder links raise questions regarding Alfonso and Manger's motivations. Starting to lose what we're talking about here. The shareholders' links raise questions regarding Alfonso and Manger's motivations. I suspect that the corporation isn't doing too well, and they're seeking investments. Any investment into Gazprom will enrich the owners, but might also lead to more jobs and growth. Any further comments, esteemed cabinet members? The room went silent and no one stepped forward. It was noticeably how much people respected whiskey. He carried the soul of Swordland as a symbol of his past. I think this summarizes as we know and what we stand to gain, Mr. President. What's your thoughts? I still don't really understand what's going on down in... I look favorably towards potential investment from Rizia into Distort. We will have to wait and hear more from Mr. Manger to decide. Alright. So we're not doing a trade deal with Rizia as much as we're allowing them to invest in one of our gas companies? Is that what's going on? In which case, a 20% investment is not that big of a deal, honestly. I look favorably toward a potential investment from Rizia into Swordland. There is strong potential for further cooperation, and Rizia previously aided Swordland when it needed foreign help the most. I will assist in analyzing the political implications, Mr. Whiskey. Thank you. Our support staff and I will be working towards the next steps soon after receiving more context from Mr. Manger. Our ambassador in Porto Drazan is in communication with Lorento Escabel, the Rizian counselor on foreign affairs already. Well, that concludes our meeting. Well, what about the trades with the other two countries that we pushed off? Alright. Thank you all for coming. I'll take my leave then, sir. The meeting concluded and the team dispersed. Our diplomatic action plan officially began. Did it? I never chose who to trade with between Agnolia and... Unless we're trading with both of them. Huh. Well, let's go back to the other map. Alright, what's going on in Estord? Read the report. In Estord, the Communist Party of Sordland and the Labor Union of Sordland have begun to protest against Gazam. The protest aimed at voicing concerns over Gazam's activities has drawn significant attention. The CPS and LUS have united their forces, adding to the intensity of the protest. The reaction of the Narbel administration and Gazam to these protests is being closely watched. The Communist Party of Sordland and the Labor Union of Sordland have set up picket lines in the city. The two organizations, after recently moving to Gazam HQ in the city, are actively expressing their discontent. The situation is attracting attention, with the impact on the city's daily functioning yet to be determined. The response of the local administration to this development is being keenly observed. Young Sword members claim links to the government. A detained Young Sword member in Arvory claimed that he has connections to the local government. We have been investigating the truth of his claims, but we're not able to find any further leads for now. Investigations about this case will be continuing. Alright. Anything in Wholesword? Read the report. Grand National Assembly's Green Bill in Wholesword. The Grand National Assembly is preparing the Green Bill with a focus on promoting sustainable industry practices, particularly in Grunai. Section 1 of the Act proposes stricter regulation on industrial pollution and waste disposal. It suggests hefty fines for non-compliance, with the collected revenue to be reinvested in environmental recovery projects. Alright, what's in the news? Remus Holstrom criticizes workers' rights bill. Remus Holstrom, deputy of the National Front Party, recently voiced objections to the workers' rights bill. Currently, in its conceptual phase, his criticism targets the bill's 5th section, which extends the same rights to migrants or undocumented workers as Sordish citizens. This proposed legislation has sparked a debate on the rights of migrant workers and the responsibility of employers, indicating a turning point in Sordland's labor law. Energy Protection Act repeal process begins. A significant development unfolds in the Grand National Assembly as the process to repeal Energy Protection Act of 1932 is initiated. This act, presently restricting foreign ownership of security-sensitive energy corporations to 20%, is now under threat. Vocal advocates Franz Richter of the and USB Reform List leader Alvin Klagan argue that the repeal could stimulate the economic growth of the foreign investment. However, opposition from the United Sordland Party and National Front Party remains protecting Sordish strategic industries from foreign control. The decision now awaits next month's crucial vote. Emergency in Enriquia. Mayor announces troubling news are coming from Mayor Enriquia, who reported that the state of chaos exists in the city and called an emergency directive authorizing him to use security powers. In an announcement, Mayor Lest said, "We are reporting 20 police officers heavily wounded, 2 police stations burned down, and several shots. The city is in a state of emergency, and we are trying to restore order." The local gendarmerie began to assisting the mayor after the emergency request was made, and the armed units are now securing critical junctions. The key infrastructure like power stations, hospitals, and municipality buildings. Local NFP leaders have announced that they will assist the local enforcement with the task of keeping the streets safe by reporting violent dissenters, a statement criticized by the local PFJP official. Enriquia. Enriquia is here. Okay. Calling for an open market, repealing the EPA. The hallowed halls of the Grand National Assembly of Swordland were recently alive with spirited debates concerning the Energy Protection Act 1932. Franz Richter of the People's Freedom and Justice Party, an independent MP, Mansoon Leak, tabled a proposal to repeal the EPA, currently restricting foreign ownership of security-sensitive energy corporations to 20%. This is a significant move as it brings to the fore the crucial issue of market openness and foreign investment. This repeal we believe can catalyze economic growth and bring foreign direct investment to a market long protected from international competition. The old guard must embrace the changing global economic order or risk lagging behind. I don't know. I would be in favor of something in between. Totally repealing it? No, I'm not a fan. Maybe changing the number to 30%? I could go for. Let's do things in small steps, guys. Let's not just make a huge change. Alright, sorry about that. What's next? Addressing the skilled foreign worker gap. Our economy faces a critical challenge: the demand-supply gap for skilled foreign workers. With increasing technological advancement, the need for specialized skills is on the rise. However, the inability to attract and retain foreign talents hinder Swordland's potential for economic growth. An inclusive approach towards immigration policy and an ecosystem conducive to skilled foreign workers are essential to address this gap. I'm all for allowing skilled workers to immigrate. Unrest continues, even after my stirring speech. Damn these people. Radical. We need democracy. We have long demanded the expansion of civil rights with reforms to modernize our nation. So this is the communist paper demanding democracy. When the previous government blamed the Supreme Court for not allowing the reforms, the opposition was quick to point out the flaws within the Constitution and brought focus on reforming the governmental structures to open a way to further civil reforms. Now the reformists have increased its number, and with a president who is seen as a symbol of change in office, we are waiting for results. Whether it is the leader of the opposition or our current president, somebody has to break the cycle and rewrite the Constitution made by Tarquin Sol, whose cult of personality has shaped our current divided national spirit and must be broken. Will President Rain stand up to the establishment and listen to the people? We will see. Well, radical, you're not the people. You're, 10 to 15% of the people. At best. Geopolitical. Energy tensions escalate in Rizia. In recent development, The Less Power, the largest energy corporation of the ATO member Lesbia, announced an energy deal with Pales over the disputed sea gas field. Wait, what? Less Power, the largest energy corporation of the ATO member Lesbia, announced an energy deal with Pales over the disputed sea gas field Arias. Rizia, which has laid claim over these fields, is likely to see an escalated tension. The Alliance of Nations, through its mechanism, Andor, has been closely monitoring the situation. Alright. So I'm trying to get close to Rizia and basically sell them our gas. And we want to be close to Lesbia. However, Lesbia is getting close to Pales, and Pales and Rizia are at each other's throats. So if we get close to Rizia and Lesbia gets close to Pales, then Lesbia and us end up on opposing sides. I don't necessarily want that. And then there's our condemnation of what Rumsberg did. Good. What did I miss in the news? Today we highlight the efforts of Alfonso, a beacon of charity. The third President Sutherland, the Foundation, had taken strides towards mitigating income inequality and addressing homelessness. Okay, sure. What's this? In a calculated effort to expand its geopolitical sway, the Cortanan Security Pact, spearheaded by Vice Secretary Chairman, has unveiled a colossal investment scheme aimed at revolutionizing Rika's infrastructure and educational sector. As the continent of Rika emerges as a fresh battleground and global tug of ideologies, comprehensive plan. Okay. The continent of Rika. Not so sure I understand how that even involves me, but alright. Repeal process proposal for the Energy Protection Act of 1932. The Grand National Assembly of Sordland gathered yesterday for a significant session where a proposal from Franz Richter of the People's Freedom and Justice Party and supported by the independent MP Mansoon Leak was put forth to repeal the Energy Protection Act of 1932. This act, as it currently stands, restricts foreign ownership of security-sensitive energy corporations to 20%. The proposal to repeal or modify this law has been a topic of debate in the Assembly, with proponents arguing for an open market approach and opponents advocating for the protection of Sordland's critical industries from foreign influence. If the repeal successfully garners the requisite majority in the Assembly, it will then head to the Maroon Palace for final approval. Is there a way I can put my input on this before it comes to my desk? Because I would like to see it maybe raised to, I don't know, 35, 40%, but not completely removed. If it's completely removed, I'm going to veto it. Briefing on the results from the Reform Committee, Tourism and Culture Preservation Act. There's a bill at my desk. Tourism and Cultural Preservation Act. Journal, Codex, Connections, Overview. Nothing on this, huh? Alright. The Swordland Tourism and Cultural Preservation Act aims to amplify the cultural allure and tourism viability of Boran, Ribery, Lochhavn, Enrica, and Benfey. The Grand National Assembly is calling a collective push to establish Swordland as a global tourist destination and reduce the effects of the recession. Okay, so far, so good. Section 1 focuses on the cultural elevation of these cities, identifying local food and drink, music, dance, architecture, and historic sites as unique selling propositions. This cultivation of cultural tourism is positioned as a catalyst for economic invigoration. Okay. Section 2 underscores the restoration and preservation of key landmarks in Lochhavn and Enrica. Concurrently, it proposes a comprehensive renovation of tourist infrastructure in Benfey to enrich the visitor experience and generate steady income for local communities. Section 2, subsection 1 further commits to the safeguarding and development of the caves of Antera in Ribery and the vineyards of Boran, recognizing their potential as tourism growth drivers. -1 government budget. Hold on. That puts a whole different spin on whether I want to go with this or not. Focuses on cultural elevation of these cities, identifying local food, drink, music, dance, architecture. Well, tourism in the long run should, if this is promoting tourism, it should help out the country's GDP in the long run. So this is an investment in a way. Section 2 underscores the restoration and preservation of key landmarks in Lochhavn and Enrica. Concurrently, it proposes a comprehensive renovation of tourist infrastructure in Benfey to enrich the... I don't see anything too negative here other than the fact that it's using my money. Alright, I'll sign it. Tourism and Cultural Preservation Act signed. In a move set to transform Swordland into a premier global tourist destination, President Anton Raines signed the Swordland Tourism and Cultural Preservation Act. This act aims to enrich cultural allure and tourism viability across Boran, Ribery, Lochhavn, Enrica, and Benfey. The focus is on cultural elevation, preservation of key landmarks, and yada yada. What does the radical have to say about this? TCPA signed by Rain, a step towards progress. With the signing of the Swordland Tourism and Cultural Preservation Act, the country takes a significant stride towards progress. The act amplifies the cultural allure of Swordland and aims to position it as a global tourist destination. Well, they agree. It must be okay then. Alright, what is this? Now it pops up here. Tourism industry booming nationwide. Swordland is experiencing a nationwide boom in tourism. Okay, excellent. Briefing on the result of the Reform Committee. I came a little early to the meeting room before anybody showed up. We had scheduled a meeting to discuss the progress of the Reform Committee regarding the new Constitution. I took a seat on the center chair in the vacant meeting room as I waited for them to show up. The reforms were slowly becoming the most significant expectation of my government. We would be changing Seoul's Constitution of 29. Most people nowadays blame the Constitution for the outstanding problems of the country. On the other hand, the reformists in the Assembly had been getting louder about their demands. What I knew for sure was that I needed to do something about this encroaching chaos before it swallowed me. Meanwhile, Lucy and Peter and Naya had been leading the committee to prepare initial draft for the constitutional amendment. I was intrigued to hear their results. There was a knock on the door. It was Lucian. Good afternoon, sir. Lucian arrived exactly on the hour. His punctuality could almost be described as obsessive. Good afternoon, Lucian. He took a seat on the table and took out a bunch of documents, spreading them on a long table. We should begin the meeting as soon as Miss Morgana and Mr. Vice President arrives. We finally have some results from the Reform Committee. How does it look? Well, the situation is quite complicated, but I'm sure we will make it work, just like we accomplished many things before. We'll go over the details regarding the new constitution in the meeting. A few minutes later, Peter and Naya also arrive. After a short chat, everybody sat down and took out their notes. I knew it was going to be a long meeting. There's a lot to talk about, the future of this process. Let us begin to tackle the points of contention. Mr. President, our committee meetings were really fruitful, and we already started working on the constitutional draft together with the reformists. They demanded a little too much, but we've had success with Franz Richter to create a realistic draft that could potentially go through the Supreme Court. A little? They demanded to rewrite the whole Constitution. Mr. Richter's deputy even suggested removing the term sword from the Constitution completely. I also didn't like their theatrics, but the requests were definitely not outrageous. They were just not realistic in today's political circumstance. Nonetheless, Mr. Vice President, thanks for your convincing arguments. We seem to have reached a common ground already. If we could fully reach an agreement with the reformist, we will be very strong in the Assembly to propose the change. Can we reach a 2/3 majority in the Assembly? If you can get Franz Richter to work with you on this, our only problem would be uniting our own party. We'll never be able to get NFP to work with us. We need the majority of the 130 seats in the Assembly to vote in favor. With PFJP's full support of 70 votes, we will easily surpass the needed 166. But it will be tough to unite the USP. With all the divisive wings that have formed, you must make them follow you loyally. We did it before for the elections, we can do it again. Albin Clavin and his reformist wing would be supporting you. He already weighed in heavily in the committee meeting. However, the conservatives would be tough to break. The influence of Saul is still living strong in the party. How many votes do they have? The conservatives have around 40 seats. There are many unaligned people, and some of your loyalists might decide to show their true faces too. So we need as many of the conservatives to support us, and there is only one person who is key to make them back us. Gloria Torrey. She's well respected by the Solist. She will be our biggest obstacle in the Assembly, and her demands will be extensive. I also have reason to think she might be in Orso's pocket. She will be tough to break, but we'll need her to get the conservative support. Is it possible to pass the Supreme Court? They are the biggest obstacle. Even if we pass the Assembly, the Chief Justice will do his best to block our amendment. We need at least 6 of the 11 judges to vote for the proposal, but Mr. Hawker has enormous influence over the judges. We should reach out to the judges in secret. Some of them might be willing to break ranks to support us. All means are to be considered in order to succeed. They will surely support a just cause for the country and its future. Lucian looks skeptical. According to the Constitution, I am a member of the Supreme Court, which means we already have 1 vote. 2 of the judges are friends of mine and of similar opinion about the reform. Consider them with me. So we only have 3 votes out of 11. Who else would be willing to support reforms? I think Judge Edmund can be persuaded, and in extension Mr. Dalton and Mr. Merton. They weren't really blinded by the Solist ideology. Yes, those 3 don't seem to be working directly with the Chief Justice Hawker. If we can get to Isabel Edmonds, we might get the 6 votes needed. That's our best bet. What are the final demands? We should run down each of the main demands of the committee and get your input first, Miss Morgana. Can explain them further. We'll start with the first red line. The new Constitution will fix the loopholes regarding the President's absolute veto power. Even though Mr. Richter put on a whole show about why vetoes should completely be removed, the committee has almost unanimously agreed on fixing the loophole, thus limiting presidential vetoes. My suggestion is to add a clause detailing the methods the Assembly may override a veto with some sort of supermajority. 1 person should never be able to block the rest. The loopholes give the President too much power? Whatever you decide, it's important to get a balanced picture. We will be making history by changing the 29 Constitution of Saul. The second one is about the judiciary. The new Constitution will remove the Supreme Court's right to vote on legislation. This is yet another point that was unanimously agreed on by all parties. Tarquin Sol established this rule to protect the 29 Constitution. We all know most of the judges are still his pawns. Constitutional amendments will still be very difficult to accomplish with a reform like this, particularly because we will keep the 2/3 vote system to be able to propose a change. However, the judiciary will not have the final say in the amendments. I can't disagree with that. Glad to hear it. Apart from these 2 critical points, they have other major demands. They want to reform the appointment procedure of the ministers. Mr. Richter clarified that the Assembly should have a say in the formation of the Council of Ministers. That is something that a majority in our party also support. Well, Mr. Richter also talked about abolishing the Member of Honor rights of Tarquin Sol. That gives him absolute immunity and makes him a permanent member of the Assembly. Well, that one is a controversial one. I doubt the USP would like that. Immunity of the justices, the impeachment of the president, limiting the power of the presidential decrees. All this came up during the committee meetings. Yes, reformists expect big reform, while our faction in the USP are not very keen on pushing change that are too great. I'd say keeping everything in the middle ground is the safest bet. No need to agitate anyone too much. I agree, let's keep the changes small and manageable. As long as we address the main issues, I also agree. Well, regardless of what Mr. Rain decides, we will need to work together to push this agenda. Now we have a better picture of your intentions, sir. I will start reaching out to my contacts to make a draft that works for us. I'll present your input to the committee in a few months. You would have the draft on your desk to make the final changes yourself. I think this was yet another fruitful meeting, sir. Thank you for the meeting, everybody. You have my support, Mr. President. I think this is where we call it, sir. Have a good day. I left the room. What's in the news? Minister Manger's Rural Development Vision. Minister of Rural Development Gus Manger recently unveiled an ambitious investment plan concept aimed at revitalizing Swordland's rural economies, ensuring the nation's food sustainability. Dubbed the Gruny Rural Development Investment, the plan envisioned judicious resource allocations to invigorate agricultural communities, strengthen food security, and bolster the regional economy of Gruny. This multifaceted strategy is indicative of a broader shift towards rural development, emphasizing sustainable agriculture and regional prosperity. Gruny, huh? Where is Gruny? Right here. Nature Preservation Protest. The Nature Preservation Foundation is protesting against the remaining coal industry, a significant contributor to Swordish energy. The group is voicing concerns about the environmental impact of the industry. The protest is gaining momentum and drawing attention to the need for sustainable energy alternatives. The future of coal industry operations in Morbel is uncertain. Always tree huggers somewhere. Okay, Lagavin. Read the report. The H3 construction plan started by Underhill. Underhill Construction has reported the preparatory work for the H3 highway has already started, including clearing land, demolishing buildings in the path of the future roadway. Construction of the highway will be starting in the next months, working west from Lagavin. Incident at President Sol's mansion on Duro Island. A private boat nearing Tarquin Sol's mansion on Duro Island prompted the Coast Guard to fire warning shots. Despite the initial alarm, former President Tarquin Sol allowed the boat to approach for a brief conversation. The occurrence has raised questions about the security protocols near the obscure mansion. Details of the conversation remain undisclosed. Okay. Meeting with old Chief Justice Orso Hawker, huh? The administration had been working day and night on the overwhelming amount of issues that were facing the country. The departments sent several documents which required my signature so they could start working on the new decisions that were taken. After I signed a dozen of them, I closed my eyes to relax for a moment. Another long day. Even though I really wished to leave the palace for the day, Lucien had earlier told me that the Chief Justice wanted to speak with me. We planned to meet in my office in 30 minutes. I waited for him, wondering what subject he would raise. Take a moment to relax. I stretched out my arms and looked out the window. Thousands of shimmering lights in the whole-sword skyline were mesmerizing. Suddenly, I heard a knock on the door. It was Lucien. Good evening, sir. Good evening, Lucien. I'm sorry that I couldn't explain the situation to you in detail earlier, sir. The Chief Justice insisted on seeing you this evening. I do not know what he has to say, but it will probably be about the new Constitution. He will be coming shortly with Judge Garcia to the meeting. We shouldn't take them lightly. I think he's here to test the waters. They are here to threaten us to stop the reforms. He may be able to cooperate. We may be able to cooperate with them. Regardless of what they say, I will continue with the new Constitution. They're here to threaten us to stop the reforms. We know they would react at some point. We should. There were 3 knocks at the door. Lucien checked his watch. He looked rather worried. Olivia opened the door. Chief Justice Orso Hawker and Judge Heron Garcia, or Garcia, whatever, entered the room. Good evening, Mr. President. It's great to see you. Evening. Welcome, Justice Garcia and Chief Justice Hawker. Good to see you indeed. Orso gestured at the sofa in the office. May I? Please. We all took our seats on 2 opposite sofas and made ourselves comfortable. How are your first couple of months, Mr. President? I hope you're faring well. Thank you. It's very busy, but I'm doing good. It will only get busier. Yet, I think you're doing a good job so far. Considering all that's happening around us, with the shootings near the palace and soldiers on our border. He let out a deep sigh. It is a troubling time. We appreciate your concerns. So, you probably know why we're here. You're here to stop the new Constitution. We are only here to tell you that the Supreme Court does not approve of the attempt to change the Constitution. With all due respect, the Constitution needs to be updated, sir. I am sure you are well aware of the public demand and our circumstances. Is that so? I see that you are the one who is not aware of our actual circumstances. You want to make a weaker Constitution in the midst of problems from both inside and outside. Even if your proposal passes the Assembly, I will make sure it will not pass the Supreme Court. That much is clear. Come on, Mr. Hawker, can we figure something out? We can, if you decide to give us a listen. Mr. President, you seem to be only partially informed about the current situation. Please let us explain the reasons of our stance. Let's hear it. We are protecting the Constitution because it works, Mr. President. It is efficient, and it gives you the authority to lead the nation with swift decisions. Swordland has more important problems and threats that we should face right now instead of nitpicking about some paragraphs of the Constitution. We have a potential war within our borders, or so signaled Heron with his hand to let him speak instead. Mr. President, I know that you are a busy man, so I will make this quick. We all know that Swordish security forces found a stash of Rumburgian weaponry in the hideouts of Bloodish separatists. K-74s are roaming inside Swordland at this very moment. As much as Rumburg poses a direct threat, now it's clear that they are also intervening in our country and weaponizing our minorities against us. It's not unprecedented to think that the Bloods will start their terror again, and with their new toys. Not to mention the fights that broke out between the left and right wing after the shooting of Bernard Circus. Communists are rising with the support of United Cortana. The chaos is imminent for Swordland. And sadly, we don't see the administration taking the necessary precautions. You said you will not focus on military during your term. Under current circumstances, that cannot be tolerated at any cost. Mr. Hawker, the court has no jurisdiction over these matters. Aren't we all part of the state, Mr. President? We are all responsible if Swordland fails to overcome these threats. But regardless of that, are you also aware that the armed Bloodish separatists have direct connections with the Workers' Party of Bloodia? The Workers' Party is a democratic party, unlike the militias. They're not the same. They may claim that they have no ties with the separatists, but most of the members used to be part of them before they formed the Workers' Party of Bloodia. How about the name, Mr. President? It is not the Workers' Party of Swordland, is it? As far as I'm aware, there's no nation called Bloodia around here. What is this all about? The only reason they are not in the Assembly is because of the electoral threshold. They have gotten quite big. They are clearly getting outside help, and their connections to the paramilitary Bloodish forces cannot be denied. And all of a sudden the reformists are trying to decrease the electoral threshold so that the Bloodish separatists can be legitimized in the Assembly to achieve their aims of independence. You think that's Mr. Richtern's intention? I suspect his intentions are grander, but I wish the only issues were the Bloodish terrorists and Rumburg. The reformist suggested changes would also bring the communists, who are backed by United Cortana, into the Assembly. Do you see the pattern yet? I apologize, gentlemen, but I'm not a conspiracy theorist. This is not a conspiracy theory. Haven't you been briefed by your security team? Maybe you should suspect them as well. We should take the necessary measures against communists and Bloodish plots, as well as increasing our military budget against a possible conflicts with Rumburg. And of course, not fall into the trap of the reformist. By listening to their demands, they are clearly plotting to weaken the president and our whole administration in order to exploit the situation. Which brings us to some very important information that we have. It's definitely something you need to hear, and it can change absolutely everything. With all due respect, Mr. President, I think this is getting slightly ridiculous. Let the Chief Justice talk, Lucian. Of course, sir. This person in question is Mr. Franz Richter himself, the leader of the reformists. We have enough information to infer that he has ties with Arcadia. Arcadia is aggressively growing their influence around the world, and now we have Mr. Richter coming up with these ridiculous demands for a new constitution amidst chaotic periods in Swordland. All the pieces seem to fit perfectly. That is why the Supreme Court will be doing what it takes to stop these reforms and preserve the Constitution. How would you know that Mr. Richter has ties to Arcadia? Mr. Galad, we all know he has been in Arcadia many a times, because it's been documented. But what would you think if he has been making hidden flights to the country? Another conspiracy theory. Believe what you will, Mr. President, but at least hear me out. He has been spotted in a hotel in Arcadia last year, where they held the Conference on Economic Development in Volatile Regions. Right around that time, he started to influence the masses into believing that our Constitution is a reason for everything bad. His trip was not documented, nor was he an official guest of the conference. We believe that he had a meeting with President Walker behind closed doors. I also have a couple more photos of him that were taken in Arcadia in different cities. One is from a couple of months back. Again, none of it is documented. He also attended another event in Lesbia last week. The Arcadian Minister of Foreign Affairs was there too. How can any of these be undocumented? We don't know. Even if he used a private plane, we would be able to get the information of his flight. That means he has people helping them from the inside. Many Solists were already following his lead for quite some time. Mr. President, I cannot give away their identities, but I can give you the evidence. He handed me a small file. It contained official documents from the Swordish border guards with highlighted dates that showed no trace of Franz Richter's name. There were clear photos of him that were taken in the conference in Arcadia, as well as remarks by lesbian Arcadian citizens who claimed to have seen him with Arcadia businessmen around the same time. There was also an official transcript of one of his speeches where he claimed to be in Benfi on the dates of the conference in Arcadia, where he was spotted. Lucian skimmed through the documents with skepticism, which slowly turned into surprise. These seem to be real. Of course they're real, Mr. Galad. These seem to suggest that Arcadia is behind the reformist. Their demands will only benefit Arcadia. They want us to have a weaker administration while we face all these threats. This is clearly a plot against Swordland. I bet Rumsburg is part of their plan too. This cannot be a coincidence that they are weaponizing our minorities against us around the same time. Now you understand the reason for our current stance, and also our suspicions about your advisors who clearly have not given you the vital information. Lucian gave him a sharp look. We appreciate the information, Mr. Hawker, but I advise against jumping to conclusions right away. We still need to check the information. There is not much to think or check. This is clearly an emergency. In such cases, the Constitution gives the President the right to use his emergency power. If we work together, you can be sure that the Supreme Court will not block your declaration of emergency. You want me to declare an emergency? Of course. We cannot wait for the process of the Assembly to take care of the issue. You must exercise your presidential powers for a fast and effective solution, which means you might need to suspend part of the Constitution to give more authority to our security forces to deal with these issues. We must officially investigate Mr. Richter as well. You can devise a strong security decree if you can base it on the Article 57 and 58, which gives the President the right to suspend parts of the Constitution to deal with national security threats. You can directly bypass the Assembly in such situations. The only thing you need is the Supreme Court to allow the emergency to be declared, and you have our word on that. Sir, I think that is going to be a bit too far. We shouldn't escalate things so fast. Mr. President, why don't we talk in private? Only two of us. We can devise a plan together. I know how we can use the Constitution to our advantage. It would be more effective if Mr. Glad and Mr. Garaki leave the room before we discuss it. Sir, I advise against it. You know, I've never really gone this route before. Though I'm thinking of a double cross. The thought going through my mind is, in the event of emergency, and the Supreme Court gives me the emergency decree, well, I can effectively do whatever I want. I could double cross the Supreme Court. I could put all the things I want into place, allowing that the game actually gives me the right things I want to do. So that's kind of one of the problems with the game is you can think, hey, I could use this to double cross the Supreme Court and push through the reforms because I'll have all the power. But if the game doesn't give you the things to click on to do the double cross, then you're stuck just going however the game makes you unfold. But I want to see if there's a way I can use this to my advantage. Could you leave us alone, Mr. Hawker, gentlemen? Lucian stood up as Orso gave me a smile. Huron paid his respects and left with Lucian, leaving me and Orso alone. So, Mr. President, if you stop the Reform Committee meetings immediately and focus on the real threat, I will guarantee you we will manage the reformists together. You must eliminate these threats, both internal and external. An emergency act can help you do that. We cannot trust anyone in the administration either. Tell me more about the legal details of an emergency act. According to Article 58, if public security and order are seriously disturbed or endangered within the People's Republic of Swordland, within the Republic of Swordland, the President of Swordland may modify and suspend parts of the Constitution. Did I just read that right? According to Article 58, if public security and order are seriously disturbed or endangered within the Republic of Swordland, the President of Swordland may modify and or suspend parts of the Constitution subject to confirmation by the Supreme Court. to determine the validity of the declaration of the state of emergency. Subject to confirmation by the Supreme Court. All right, well, which part of the Constitution can we modify or suspend? That is kind of a gray area. The Constitution states that no state shall, in the case of national emergency, modify or suspend the rights of freedom defined in Article 100 of the Constitution unless actually invaded or in such imminent danger as will not admit of delay. If we want to give the police more authority, we might need to modify the rights of freedom too. But we are not under invasion. Such imminent danger, that can definitely be argued, but we are not under invasion. That is correct. However, the section where it states that actually invaded and or such imminent danger as will not admit of delay can be up to interpretation. We are definitely under such imminent danger because of Rumsberg. Not to mention United Cortana's support for the communist coup in Swordland, as well as Franz Richter's involvement with Arcasia, which is definitely connected to all of these problems. And of course, that is up to the Supreme Court to decide, so that is not a problem. Can't the Assembly simply revoke it? According to the Constitution, only the President and the Grand National Assembly can revoke. According to the Constitution, only the President and the Grand National Assembly can revoke the emergency after it is declared. That is correct. However, as long as your party is in line, they will never have a majority to revoke it immediately. So no, they cannot simply revoke it. How can we effectively silence the opposition? I don't plan to silence the opposition, but I have no other thing to click on. We may need increased surveillance on our political rivals to find out about their connections and plots. Bringing unlimited detention would allow you to arrest people as necessary, such as Mr. Richter. Well, maybe I could arrest you, Mr. Orzo. What if the investigation cannot find anything incriminating? The information that I gave you can be enough, depending on what part of the Constitution you'll modify. In an emergency, anything is possible, Mr. President. The Supreme Court will support your decisions. Let's talk about the details of this Emergency Act. You must first justify the Emergency Act. We need to have at least one target that we can blame the conflict on. They will be declared as a national security threat, and this would allow us to prosecute their members or people connected to them. There are obvious connections between the Bloodish separatist and Rumberg, and their separatists have clear connections to the Workers' Party of Bloodia. They should be declared a national security threat, and the party should be banned. You must first justify the Emergency Act. We need to have at least one target that we can blame the conflict on. I thought we were going to blame it on Rumsberg. There are obviously connections between the Bloodish Separatists and Rumsburg. Can't we just... Can't we skip the whole Bloodish people? Why do we have to get them involved? I don't want to create problems with our Bloodish citizens, but they are already creating problems for us. Most Bloods in Bergia are either ballsy enough to show their support for the Separatists or they vote for the Workers' Party. But let's not forget about the Socialists. Red youth must also be our target. They are plotting a communist revolution in Swordland with clear funding from United Cortana, and now they took to the streets after the death of Bernard Circus. There are already clashes and protests in the streets. You can also justify an action against the Young Swords. After all, they started all this mess with the commies, and they killed a man right near the Maroon Palace. That can be considered a declaration of war against the state itself. I need to think about this. I don't think there's much to think, but let's talk about how we can deal with them. We should eliminate the threat on our streets first. The police should have the authority to disperse crowds as necessary. We also have to keep the streets clean from the socialist thugs and the Bloodish Separatists. We should give more authority to the police regarding their use of force. They should be able to stop and frisk as necessary, especially in Bloodish neighborhoods. Just nod. The police will also need permission for increased surveillance against these organizations. They should be able to search property without warrants, and wiretapping should be permissible beyond its current limits. They will also need to be able to act swiftly. If a person is suspected of crime against the national security of Swordland, the police should be able to detain them without trial. We cannot allow them proper trials anyway. Can you believe all this is being said by the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court? Just nod. There are also the external threats we must face. Rumsburg has acted hostile in the past, and now they are arming the Bloods. We must cut all ties with them. They need to be embargoed. Their citizens must be barred from entering Swordland. We must erase all their influence in Swordland, weaken their trade, and give them a message. Rumsburg is our biggest enemy. We must react. And of course, we need to prepare our army in case they have a very powerful military and they seem to have plans on our soil. Then there are the superpowers. Both are influencing our nation to be in their spheres. It seems Arcadia already bought Mr. Richter and possibly is behind all this. The United Cortana is funding Swordish communists against the state. We will not bow to them, Mr. Hawker. I know we won't. They tried to divide Swordland before, but we came out stronger after the Civil War. I salute Colonel Saul for that. May God preserve his soul. Orsa looked at the clock in the office and then outside the window. Mr. President, I have taken too much of your time already. I will be reaching out again after you dissolve the Reform Committee and end the pursuits for reform. Again, I'm not sure what the game is going to allow me to do here. If I proceed with the deal and then I don't have any ability to double cross the Supreme Court, then I will have effectively completely destroyed this playthrough. As I don't really want to do any of the things I've begrudgingly agreed to here. I have no desires to do most of this stuff that he's recommended. No desires at all. In fact, I simply want the declaration of emergency so that I can then turn it around and use it against him. I hope the game allows me to do that. Let's try it. I will. I've played this through so many times, but I'm also playing this through with you guys. So, all right, I will stop the reform shortly. That's great to hear. He slowly got up from the sofa. It was great talking to you, and I'm looking forward to our cooperation, Mr. President. Oh, you have no idea. We shook hands on our deal. This also meant that I made an unholy alliance with the old guard. Have a good evening, Mr. Rain. Likewise. After he left, I called in Lucy and explained to him about my decision to stop the reform and called Peter to dissolve the committee on the next day. This was the point of no return. Oh, please let me be able to double cross. Cooperation with Rumberg, an economic imperative? Amidst ongoing geopolitical uncertainties, there is an economic imperative that we can't ignore. The potential of our northern neighbor Rumberg, known for its large energy economy and access to two leading energy corporations, Rizian Oil and Gasrog Corporations and Royal Emerald Energy, ripe for collaboration. These energy giants represent not just possibility of wealth generation. Okay. Hawker in Maroon Palace. Chief Justice Austin Hawker has been spotted entering the Maroon Palace. Our sources are intrigued by the timing of this visit that is happening right after the increased conversation around the so-called democratic reform. Historically, Mr. Hawker usually does not frequent the palace unless for official business, and this was certainly an unplanned visit. Job freeze sparks fear for Gassam financial stability. Iotake plan, a global perspective. Alright, here we are. So, I'm embarking on a path I've never actually taken in this game. Only because I'm hoping I can use this power I'm going to get to do the things I really want to do, not the things the Chief Justice wants me to do. If in fact, maybe I should have saved. Well, we'll see. We'll see what happens, guys. So this is where we're going to wrap up this episode. Anyway, I'm James Johnson, aka Self-Relate. Hopefully you're enjoying the channel. If so, please smash that like button, consider subscribing, and until the next time, all, peace.